TV, on radio and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 10.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. Liverpool are demanding answers after the chaotic scenes outside the Paris Stadium before the Reds' defeat at the Champions League final. Fans struggled to get into the Stade de France, causing a 30-minute delay to kick off. Police used tear gas to disperse the crowd, clogging up the gates. Witnesses are blaming poor organisation at the ground, but UEFA have said fans caused the hold-up because they were trying to enter with fake tickets. Liverpool have refuted the claims. Real Madrid scooped their 14th European Cup after defeating Liverpool 1-0. Manager Jurgen Klopp spoke about the delays before the game following the match.
I know that the families had real struggles to get into the stadium, but the reasons, I don't know yet. But I heard that we will have, what is they saying for that, further investigations to figure out what's going on there. I heard a few things. They were not good, not nice. Obviously, that was pretty tricky out there, but I don't know more about it.
Downing Street have denied putting pressure on Sue Gray to dilute her report into lockdown-breaking parties ahead of its publication. The Sunday Times is reporting that senior civil servants tried to have some names excluded, claiming the so-called ABBA party held in the Prime Minister's flat on November the 13th, 2020, was tweaked by Boris Johnson's Chief of Staff, Steve Barclay. In Brazil, at least 35 people have been killed after a landslide. Heavy rain in the northeast state of Pernambuco caused the hillside to collapse in a suburb of Recife. Many locations in the city are vulnerable to mudslides. President Bolsonaro is preparing to dispatch a federal task force to help the salvage operation. And in Nepal, a plane carrying 22 people has gone missing. The small private aircraft from Tara Air, similar to this one, was flying from the tourist town of Polhara, around 120 miles from the capital, Kathmandu. An airline official said passengers included Indian nationals. Nepal has a record of air accidents with its changeable weather conditions and airstrips in mountain locations. The race is on to stop an oil spill on the Devon coast after a fire on a super yacht. The vessel, which is carrying around 8,000 litres of fuel, sank in a Torquay marina after the blaze yesterday. Dramatic images showed thick plumes of black smoke billowing across the harbour as flames engulfed the boat. And the world's longest glass-floored bridge is now open in Vietnam. The White Dragon Bridge is more than 2,000 feet long, with a see-through bottom made from 3 layers of thick tempered glass. The crossing, which can hold 450 people at a time, links 2 mountain tops across a 500-foot deep valley. Now, time for today's weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
This morning it will be a cooler feeling and generally cloudier day compared to Saturday, with showers developing across many areas. So these locally heavy, possibly thundery in the south and southwest. In Scotland, there's a mix of bright or sunny spells and scattered showers. The showers and cloudiest conditions being in the north and east. Moving south, and Northern Ireland will be mostly dry with sunny spells, but Northern England will be rather cloudy, especially in the east. There'll also be scattered showers, although many places will remain dry. Wales and the Midlands will also be rather cloudy with limited sunshine. There'll be a scattering of showers here, with heaviest, possibly thundery, across southern Wales. There's little change as we head across southern England. The heaviest showers with a risk of hail or thunder across southwest England. Showers will ease later as bright or sunny spells also develop, feeling cooler than of late.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
I think the topic that I'd like more people to be thinking about is definitely health and social care. You know, we have an outrageous system where we don't look after our elderly in the way we should. We've got to have a proper grown-up and honest conversation about that.
And a very good morning to one and all. Yes, it's just after 10 o'clock. It's Sunday the 29th of May. Whatever you're doing, whether you're still in bed looking forward to the Platinum Jubilee week, or whether you're up and about, whether you're mowing the lawn, making the scrambled eggs, stay with us for the next 3 hours because we have a huge, huge show ahead. As I look outside the window from the 17th floor, the weather's a bit mixed. It was bright earlier, but it's a bit mixed, and that's slightly my mood. I'm a bit sad because my beloved Liverpool lost last night. We'll be talking about that later. But I'm excited, of course. We've got the Queen's Jubilee, so much to look forward to. And also, really importantly, looks like we might get the Queen's crown back on pint glasses. But why does it need a consultation to do that? For heaven's sake. Much more coming up indeed. In the first hour of the show, we're going to be talking about the cost of living crisis and Boris Johnson's polling. What's really going on in the Red Wall seats and possibly his own seats? Rumours circulating again about the leadership challenge. In the second hour, we're going to be talking about the record lawful immigration numbers last year, Russian sanctions, and of course we've got to talk about the Champions League game last night, both inside and outside the stadium. What really went on? And the third hour is what I call my climate hour, my energy hour. We're going to be talking about shale gas, the review that's going on at the moment. We're going to be also joined by a guest from the west coast of America who's authoring a new extraordinary book called Fossil Fuels, Why Human Flourishing Requires More Oil, More Coal and More Natural Gas, Not Less. That's slightly controversial, isn't it? And my big question to you is, what do you think of Rishi Corbyn's state giveaway last Thursday? Has it changed your view of the Tories? Are they back in your favour? Are they in touch with the problems of the nation? And I want your input, your views, your calls, please, because that's what makes a great show. You know the number, 0344 499 1000. Or, if you don't want to call, just send us a text using the word TALK, 87222, or tweet us at Talk TV. There's so many ways to get involved. And when you call, you can release your excitement or your anxieties, your frustrations. I may not be able to cure them, but I will certainly help you release them. You know the number, and you're listening here on Talk TV. It's Tice Talk. Yes, indeed, that wonderful music heralds the beginning of my Sunday sermon. And this week, I want to focus on the economic state of the nation. Because I regret that the news is bad. I fear we're facing the worst economic crisis since World War II. I've never been more anxious. We've got a crisis of low growth, the lowest decade in the last decade, and facing us ahead for over 60 years. We've got a crisis of low productivity. The public sector has seen no improvement. Indeed, they've seen a collapse of over 10% in productivity over the last 20 years. We've got a crisis of high inflation, the highest for over 30 years. We've got a risk of stagflation. And with these crises, we want a competent government to be able to respond appropriately. Now, we should be able to rely on Chancellor Sunak. He's worked in the city. He's worked in private equity. He's been successful. And he claims to be a conservative. In fact, unbelievably, hilariously, he claims to be in favour of cutting taxes. But what was his response? What's his response been to this economic crisis that faces us? Well, he's been raising taxes at least 15 times, including personal taxes. Not content with that, he's been raising company taxes. How does he think you'll get higher growth when we've got a low growth crisis? How do you get higher growth with higher taxes? He's been raising government spending. How's that going to control inflation? How does higher government spending improve productivity? And for the second time in just 2 years, he's creating amongst millions and millions of people a sense of, a culture of dependency, a subsidy culture from the government. The truth is that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister, they've done things that Jeremy Corbyn, in his wildest dreams, couldn't really believe he could have got away with. And that's why I call the Chancellor now, I've renamed him. Not only is he a con-socialist, but he's actually Rishi Corbyn. I mean, he's presiding over one of the most grotesque tax and spend chancellors ever. Boris's government is spending 55% more than Tony Blair's government just 15 to 20 years ago. So I need to sound the klaxon, the alert. Bells should be pealing all over the country during my Sunday sermon. It's the klaxon of socialism, I'm afraid. Yes, ring out the alarm bells, because millions and millions of people more are dependent on government subsidies. This is literally what socialism is all about. Listen out for those alarm bells, that klaxon. There's less incentive to work hard if more and more people are dependent on subsidies. Unbelievably, there are now well over 5 million people on out-of-work benefits. So let's just think about that. That's about 12% of the working age population. 5.3 million. So we're told there's good news in that we've got full employment, that there are more job vacancies than there are people out of unemployed. But hang on, something's not right. Something doesn't compute. We've got well over 5 million people of working age on out-of-work benefits. Some 12% of the working age population. It's over 1.5 million more people than at the time of the referendum. And throughout this period, there's been this thing called a Conservative government. I mean, something just is not right here. Over 5 million people, economically inactive, reliant on state subsidies, state handouts, and you build up this culture of dependency. We're the second worst performing economy across the whole of Europe since the pandemic. So we need to shout from the rooftops. This is truly a socialism alert, because basic free market conservative economics says this: you stimulate growth by cutting taxes, not by raising them. You reduce inflation by cutting taxes on consumer goods. You improve productivity by cutting wasteful, unnecessary government spending. And you encourage work. It's a good thing. It makes us healthier. You encourage work by cutting taxes to increase the incentive to work. It's absolutely essential at a time when supposedly we've got full employment to get more of the economically inactive people back to work. So cut taxes for those in work, and then the differential will be greater. That's the way to create growth. That's the way to improve productivity. I fear that this Conservative Chancellor, Rishi Corbyn, and the Treasury, they are taking the nation towards socialist disaster. If there's no rapid change over the coming months, the danger is we as a nation become so far gone, too far gone, that you actually can't get it back. It's a bit like water going towards a waterfall. If you want to stop it, you've got to quickly build a dam. But once the water's gone over the waterfall, you can't get it back. It's gone. It's finished. It's over. So we as a great nation, with such a great opportunity post-Brexit, is being wasted by the very leader and leadership team that promoted Brexit. It's truly, truly unbelievable. We're heading towards a socialist disaster. And I repeat again, what we should be doing is stimulating growth by cutting taxes across the board. We should be reducing inflation by cutting taxes on consumer goods, because then the basket of goods will be at lower prices. That reduces inflation. We should cut wasteful government spending. That'll improve productivity. And I want your help understanding over 5.3 million people of working age on out-of-work benefits. Something is seriously, something is badly, badly wrong. And if we are not careful, if we don't wake up to the klaxons, the bells pealing all over the country, that there is socialism around the corner, then we face careering towards disaster. And with that, here endeth my Sunday sermon. Well, what do you think? Have I got this right or have I got this wrong? Are we heading towards socialist disaster? Or maybe actually socialism is better? You know the number, 0344 499 1000 with your thoughts. Do you want Rishi Corbyn to carry on with his state giveaways? Or do you want a proper incentive to get out there, to roll your sleeves up, to get stuck in, to work a bit harder, to earn a bit more, so that you can make decisions how you spend your cash? Well, after the break, I'll be asking Gerard Lyons, the Chief Economic Strategist at NetWealth, about his views on Boris Johnson's state giveaways. What's happened to this Conservative government? What does he think the solution is to the inflation crisis? But you know the number. And if you don't want to call, then send us a message, send us a tweet, or send us a text, because I really want to hear from you about this. I've never been more concerned. And that question is very simple. What do you think of Rishi Corbyn's state giveaway? Are you happy with the subsidy culture? Are you happy with more state dependency? Do we want to move towards free market, conservative, individual responsibility? Or maybe we should just lie back and just accept state handouts until it all goes completely wrong, completely and utterly pear-shaped. Stay with us. You're listening to the home of common sense, where we tell the truth as it is. It's Tice Talk, here at Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. It's 20 past 10. We're into the first hour. And I think I must have said something, because the switchboard has literally lit up with whether or not people want socialism, are happy with it. And I must say, the tweets are quite entertaining too. Absolutely brilliant from ZTX, who says, Richard, it's not Rishi Corbyn, although that's good in brackets, it's Comrade Sunak. Well, I must say, what do you think? Is it Rishi Corbyn or is it Comrade Sunak? I look forward to your thoughts, your views, or maybe that's the best answer. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by Gerard Lyons, who's the Chief Economic Strategist at NetWealth and a former economic advisor to Boris Johnson. A very good morning to you, Gerard. Thanks for being with me on Tice Talk. So, I don't know if you heard my Sunday sermon, but it seems to have got people going, whether or not it's Rishi Corbyn or Comrade Sunak with his state giveaway this week. What are your thoughts?
Well, good morning. It's great to be on the show. Let me focus on the economics, shall we say, rather than the politics. I'll leave it to you, Richard. But look, the economy faces a significant challenge. Inflation has yet to peak and is likely to stay elevated for some time. But at the same time, largely because the cost of living crisis is hitting hard, the economy is now slowing significantly. Consumer confidence is at the lows last seen during the financial crisis in 2008, and there's every likelihood of a technical recession at least. That's 2 successive quarters of negative growth. So against this backdrop, the policy response, well, ideally we shouldn't be where we are now, but the policy response has to be a tighter monetary policy, but it also has to be a looser fiscal policy. So in that respect, I think the Chancellor was right during the week to provide a significant boost. But at the same time, my personal view was that he should have targeted and used the money in a different way. I, for instance, thought it was right to provide timely, temporary and targeted help to those on low incomes because they basically don't have any money. But at the same time, I felt that he should have focused on reducing some of the tax components of fuel, for instance, reducing VAT, temporarily removing the environmental levy. But on top of that, and finally, I would have said that he should have helped the squeeze middle by fast-forwarding, bringing forward the planned 1% or 1p cut in income tax. So I felt he was right to provide a boost, largely because the economy is weakening significantly. But how he used that, I would have preferred using tax cuts rather than trying to spend in all sorts of areas.
So I'm with you on this. Clearly something had to be done. There's no question about that. The position was completely unsustainable. The only question was sort of why it took so long. But with his state giveaway, he is, in a sense, yes, he's providing a boost, but he is creating a sense of dependency. And I'm with you, you see. Because if he had cut VAT on energy bills, if he'd removed the environmental levies, if he'd cut, for example, fuel duty significantly, possibly even a small VAT cut across everything, that would have actually helped to impact reducing inflation, wouldn't it? Because you're cutting the price of goods, whereas nothing he's done is actually going to help reduce the crisis of inflation, which is a brutal, vicious circle.
Yeah, let's take each of those in turn. Let's take the inflation first. I think the Chancellor has been handed a hospital past by the Bank of England. Last year, monetary policy should have tightened. Instead, it went the other way and was loosened. And that meant that the inflation situation was worse. And we're starting from a position where we're in a more difficult situation. Now, unfortunately, for many people, monetary policy will have to tighten. Hopefully, it will not be on autopilot, but the speed, the scale, the sequence of monetary tightening has to be influenced by economic conditions. And important within that banks don't suddenly now hit small firms who are facing the cost crunch with a credit crunch. But monetary policy has to start to address inflation. But as you correctly said, he hasn't done anything specifically during the week to actually help ease on the inflation component. What the Chancellor has tried to do is recognise, and probably with the Prime Minister's prompting, recognise that the economy is so weak it needs a fiscal boost. Now, the good thing is the fiscal numbers are improving, but on the fiscal side, we've had, unfortunately, a series of mistakes. The national insurance increase announced last year, I thought, was a mistake. The corporation tax hike plan for next April, I personally think is a mistake. So there's too much intervention in raising taxes. I personally think he should recognise that budget numbers have improved to give him scope. But yes, in terms of the different components, it was right that he did give help to the households that have basically no room for manoeuvre. But I wouldn't have given the £400 across the board cut to everyone on their fuel bill. I would have actually gone for the routes that you've touched on, cutting VAT or other components, which I think would have made more sense. Incentives matter, and as you say, would have helped on the price of many things as well at the same time.
Because I think that he's in a sense he's boosting in the wrong areas, and at the same time he's not doing it. There's no talk about reducing government spending. There's no talk about reducing the inefficiencies, the waste in government that all of us know is there. You know, when I knock on doors, I hear stories of government waste. There seems to be none of that. I mean, almost every household across the land, Gerard, is probably saying, well, how can I save £5 in 100? You know, where's the mantra in government to save £5 in 100? Because very quickly you're talking about quite large numbers. On a trillion spend, that's 50 billion.
That's right. The real challenge is actually trying to do all these things now at the same time. But on the public spending side, certainly the austerity would probably hit the economy hard at the moment. But you're quite correct. There's no focus on improving the quality of public spending, or, as it used to be said, public sector reform. So I think that is key. Coming back to the broader picture, at the moment we have a sort of spend and tax environment. Certainly public spending is vitally important, but has to be in the areas it's needed, but it should go alongside public sector reform. What I find worrying at the moment is the combination of tax changes and also ever-increasing regulations means that the incentives not being given either to people or particularly to small firms. One key thing we have to keep a focus on is the labour market in coming months. Even though the rate of unemployment is very low, and that's a welcome news, 500,000 people have dropped out of the labour force since before the pandemic. What we need to make sure is we incentivise people to come back into the labour market. And so therefore, in terms of targeting the money this week, whilst it was the right thing to do, I thought he should have done that through the universal credit system and immediately uplifting benefits in line with inflation. I think that would have been more effective, and the universal credit would have incentivised and made it easier for people to go back into the labour force, or at least minimise the hit there. I agree with you, he's not doing it in the right way.
My concern is actually even those numbers are even worse. I mean, as I was talking about in my sermon, there's 1.5 million more people on out-of-work benefits than before the referendum in 2016 in the last 6 years. So you sort of wonder, what are those people doing? Why can't we get them back into the labour market? It feels to me that the gap between working and the incentive to work and benefits is clearly not great enough, and that's really serious.
Yeah, right. There are two big issues in one respect. The first issue is that we've got to help the economy now. The second is to actually address some of these structural problems. So it's about having context. I think everyone's clever enough to understand the current context. It's then taking actions, and then on top of that, it's the vision for future change. And indeed, it's since the 2008 financial crisis that things have been difficult. Put it in this respect, before the 2008 financial crisis, the economy grew at a rate of growth of 2.4%, so we doubled in size every 32 years. Now our rate of growth means we double in size every 60 years. That's the reality of the situation. Half the population who are in work are in low-wage, low-skilled jobs, and that's the challenge. So we need more in-works, in-skilled training, everything like that. But he has to help people now.
I get the short-term help. I think you and I agree, Gerard, it's in the wrong direction. Gerard Lyons, thank you so much indeed, Chief Economic Strategist at NetWealth, for his thoughts on what the Chancellor is doing right, what he's doing wrong. But I want your thoughts. You know the number, 0344 499 1000. We'll take your calls, your messages. It's Tice Talk on Talk TV.
I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk TV. I think my most memorable and proudest moment in journalism over all these years is actually being on air during the lockdowns, even when I had COVID myself. Over the last 2 years, getting people to tell their stories, not just about people who lost loved ones to COVID, but people who lost their fundamental freedoms, their children's schooling, their mental health, their physical health, their businesses, and giving people a chance to tell their stories about how it affected them.
Welcome back to Tice Talk here this Sunday morning. Well, that was Gerard Lyons with his thoughts about what Rishi Corbyn, or Comrade Sunak, is doing with his giveaway this week. But I want your thoughts, your views, lots coming in, and lots of people really, really concerned. We're going down to Fareham, where John is patiently on the line. Morning, John.
Morning, Richard. How are you?
Well, I'm anxious. I've got to be honest. I'm fine, but I'm anxious. What about you, John?
Yeah, I think we all are. Yeah, Richard. Listening to your Sunday sermon, I think one of the inflationary issues are percentage rises. For instance, if you're on, say, 150,000 a year and you get a 5% pay increase, that equates to 7,500. Whereas if you're on 20,000 a year, that only equates to 1,000 a year increase. Yet if the poor man's loaf of bread goes up 50p, the rich man's loaf of bread goes up 50p, not by a larger percentage of his income. Did you see where I'm going with this?
Correct, but therefore the price increases affect the least well off, the lowest paid, the most.
Yes.
That's why inflation is so brutal for those on lower incomes, and that's why controlling inflation, I put forward some suggestions, is absolutely vital, because otherwise it becomes a vicious circle.
Yes, and the gap gets forever wider between what the higher earner gets and what the lower earner gets, and the inflation affects the poorer paid worker much more, which is exactly what you're saying.
That's right, but that's why, in a sense, you've got to increase the incentive to work, in my view, by dramatically increasing the minimum level at which people start paying income tax. Currently, you start paying income tax if you're earning over 12.5 grand a year. If you increase that, for example, to, my plan is to 20,000, that's an extra 1,500 quid, or call it 30 quid a week, right?
Yes.
For anybody who's earning over 20,000. That's a real incentive to get back to work.
Absolutely.
And these numbers of people that are economically inactive, reliant on benefits, I mean, it's the road to socialism, it's the road to ruin, in my view.
Yes, yeah, surely, yes.
I'm really concerned about it. John, thank you so much for your thoughts. What a great call to start the show with. Lots of tweets coming in here. One from Chris, who says, "Morning, Richard, great show. Regarding national insurance contributions, everyone keeps saying it's a tax rise, but isn't it the case that everyone earning less than 34 grand are now paying less tax due to a change in the tax thresholds? I think this needs clarifying." I'm afraid, Chris, actually no, because the Chancellor has frozen the tax thresholds at just over 12.5 grand, when inflation's going up, actually the Treasury's earning more cash, and all of us individuals, we're earning less cash. That's the harsh reality. So taxes are going up, and the Treasury's the winner, and we, the working individual, is the loser. And that just cannot be right. You've got to incentivise people to get out there and to get working. That's why we've got this sort of strange situation where we think we've got full employment, but we haven't. Because there's over 5 million people of working age who are on out-of-work benefits. That's 1.5 million more than the referendum. Daniel's in Surrey. Morning, Daniel. What are your thoughts?
What's happening, Richard? I've just paid out £28,000 corporation tax, so my thoughts are, I don't really want to go there, but it was quite painful, to be honest. Now,
I'm afraid, Daniel, that's before corporation tax goes up in next year.
Yeah, I mean, I had VAT just 2 weeks before, which was about 8-9 grand as well. I mean, so I'm just things are tough for me. But what I hate is, I mean, I'm in the game of life, I'm doing all right. I rolled a 6, right? So why would I get £400 off of I can afford it. You know, I don't need £400 off of my bills. What I hate with this current con-socialist Green government that no one voted for or asked for is they're kind of giving away money willy-nilly. Why not just help the people who need help? Or, you know, help people a different way. I don't need the £400. So it's a bit like, my wife says, oh, the kids can have free school dinners. I said, well, they're not free. They're not having them. They're going packed lunch. You know, if everyone was like me in the country and they saw it wasn't actually free, but someone would have to pay, we'd be so much better off.
I think that's right. It's about, I mean, as you say, and as Gerard Lyons quite rightly said, in particular, pensioners, you know, who actually obviously are unable to go out to work, for example, although some are and will be possibly part-time, you know, you've got to help them, and that's absolutely right, because, you know, of these huge increase in the energy bills. But there's many people, if you cut people's income taxes, then that's an incentive to work, you know, to get out there.
I do think the government, but I think their biggest problem, the current Socialist, Green, Conservative Party that are in office, is true conservatives like me just won't vote for them. And people like me, or the majority of the voting public, I'm not going to go and vote for Keir Starmer or the Lib Dems, but I'm just not going to vote at all. And what that means is we end up with some concoction of Green stroke whoever Labour Party getting in power by default, because they're not. Because they're not the right of centre, tough Conservative Party that we voted for and we asked them to be. We want the economy, law and order and immigration as our top three topics. And currently all three of them are pretty much in disarray. Get a grip or put someone else in power that can do it, Richard.
Daniel, you're so right. All of those three things are critical to an efficient functioning society and nation. And regrettably, this government is going backwards on all three. But hopefully there will be an alternative option for you to vote for, Daniel, at the next general election, because I think that democracy is better when there are more options, more choices on the ballot paper for people to vote for. I get it, Daniel. Thank you very much for that great call. We are looking at lots of messages coming in. We have one here from Gareth who says, many people, Richard, have expectations nowadays that the government should do everything. The reality is the government is therefore taking everything. Inflation, tax, regressive and insidious. Gareth, I suspect many people agree with you. Let's see what Chris in London thinks. Morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Hi, what are your thoughts? How are you feeling? Maybe, what do you think? Is it Rishi Corbyn or is it Comrade Sunak?
I've no problem with anyone being a comrade. I'm a nurse. I work 37.5 hours a week plus overtime because we're so short-staffed of frontline staff. And the old adage that the Tories spout out about hard work equals, equals pay, equals good money, being able to live a good life. No, hard work in this country doesn't pay anymore. I'm working, up to 50 hours a week sometimes just to try to make ends meet. I live in a studio flat as a nurse, working full-time plus extra time, working, trying to pay my bills, and I pay £1,200 for a studio flat in Balham in London. That's deplorable. Then I've got a Prime Minister that's spending £500 to £1,000 a roll of wallpaper. I think it's just disgusting. I think we need a universal basic wage for everyone. Having fat cats, having cuts and their money protected in offshore accounts means there's less money in the local economy. If you give money to low-paid workers, increase their wage, give money to communities, they spend it in that community, which is good economic advice for... I
get that, Chris. And I think what's interesting about what you're saying is really that actually we want work to pay. And interestingly, it's easy to forget... about 300 years ago, when income tax was introduced, firstly, it was supposed to be temporary. We know what's happened to that. But also, actually, Chris, income tax was introduced for the wealthy. That was its initial purpose. And my concern is, and you've absolutely, I think, hit it on the head, that you're having to work harder and harder, and yet the struggle seems to be going greater and greater. So eventually, you're sort of saying... where's the benefit of working? Whereas actually, if you dramatically increase the level at which you start paying income tax, then actually you've got more money in your pocket to see the benefits of work, and then you can decide how you spend it.
Exactly. And I won't even see, because of where I am where I've been a nurse for nearly 15 years, and where I've worked my way up, I teach nursing to other nurses. We've got a massive influx of Filipino nurses in the NHS and Nigerian nurses that I'm training now. And there's lots of challenges to that. And the job is getting harder and harder. There's less frontline workers. We're cutting services. We're cutting services like mental health assessments for new mums and babies. We're cutting the mandated appointments for a lot of families, vulnerable families, because we haven't got people on the ground.
Well, Chris, we need to get more people back working. And Chris, finally, just thank you so much for everything you do in nursing all around that, which sounds fantastic. That was Chris in London with his concerns about why he's not able to save anymore. Stay with us, give us a call. I want your views, your thoughts. After the break, we're going to be talking to Joe Twyman about the polling about Boris Johnson in the Red Wall seats. Stay with us, it's Tice Talk on Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're into the first hour of my 3-hour show this Sunday morning. We've got some great messages coming in. Kim says on Twitter, so the benefit culture is now starting to harm the economy, ? Millions have made a life choice to live on benefits. Richard thinks cutting taxes will get them back to work. The reality is, Kim says, millions don't want to work. Well, I think if the incentive is right, I would hope that many of those people, I think fundamentally people do want to feel energised, to feel engaged. But maybe I've got it wrong. Let me know what you think. Meanwhile, lots of people have got lots of thoughts about the Prime Minister. Should he stay? Should he go? We've had the Sue Gray report this week. We've got certain Tory MPs sending letters into the 1922 committee. It's all go. Many people thought, you know, this would just sort of disappear, be yesterday's news. But the polling indicates something different may be going on. So I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Twyman, who's the co-founder of Delta Poll. Joe, a very good morning. Thanks for being with us. So I think a number of polls coming out over the last few days showing particularly that the Prime Minister and indeed the Conservative government could be in real trouble in the Red Wall seats that they successfully won back in 2019. What's going on there? What's the evidence behind it, Joe?
Well, there was a big survey done by my former colleagues at YouGov using something called MRP, which is a form of statistical analysis which allows you to estimate results at a individual constituency level. And they showed really a reflection of what we're seeing at the moment in the polls generally, which is that the Conservatives are not doing particularly well in the kind of seats they need to hold on to come the next general election. And this is really a reflection of what we saw at the local elections, where the broadcasters, Sky and the BBC, used that data plus historical precedent to do a big load of analysis and modelling to identify the degree to which you could expect a national result based on those local results if there were a general election. And it was found that either, depending on who you spoke to, the Conservatives would be the largest party in a hung parliament, or Labour would be the largest party in a hung parliament. But in both cases, it showed a lot of losses for the Conservatives. And those polls have remained relatively consistent since the local elections. And so it's no surprise that this has come out. Now, of course, many of your listeners will be saying, yes, but there isn't a general election today. And,
Indeed.
And the local elections are not a general election. And that is correct. But it demonstrates the depth of trouble the Conservatives are in at the moment.
So we've got a couple of live examples. There's a by-election going on down in Tiverton and Honiton. There's one up in Wakefield, which of course is a red wall seat. So they in themselves, I guess, they'll be very interesting. There may be sort of a protest vote there. There was even a suggestion that the Prime Minister could be in trouble in his own seat in Uxbridge, but we sort of heard that before the last election. So what are your thoughts on that? Is that just does that just make a good media headline?
Well, I'll take the by-elections first. By-elections are interesting in many ways, and in many ways they're not very interesting. What these both represent is a particular type of constituency. Wakefield is a red wall constituency with a very narrow Conservative victory at the last election, and very specific circumstances with the Conservative MP at the time leaving after sexual abuse allegations. And so the circumstances of that mean that, really, if Labour don't win there, they have to ask very serious questions about exactly where their prospects lie. And similarly in Tiverton, with the Conservatives holding on to that seat, given that consistently the Conservatives get over 50% of the vote, and at the last election got over 60% of the vote, if the Conservatives cannot hold on there and the Lib Dems can sneak in to win, then serious questions will be asked of Boris Johnson about where they will be able to hold on to. And then the question of Boris Johnson's own seat, that's based, again, on this MRP modelling. And without getting too technical, what you can't do in that modelling is take account of hyper-local factors, such as the fact that the Conservative MP in that particular constituency is the Prime Minister. And we know historically, particularly for Boris Johnson, that has had a benefit. Now, that doesn't mean that he's definitely going to hold on to his seat, but it means that he's far more likely to hold on to than the modelling perhaps suggests.
And then I guess the other thing behind the sort of, aside from the technicalities of the quite sophisticated modelling and polling you've just referred to, is the potential for some form of implicit, behind-the-scenes arrangement between the Liberals, the Lib Dems and the Labour Party. You work hard in that seat and I'll work hard in this seat, and we'll sort of engineer it to reduce the likelihoods of the Conservatives winning particular seats. How significant could that be? Could that be more significant, actually, than some of the other factors?
It really depends on the specific circumstances of the constituency. But certainly, in some constituencies, an agreement, whether formal or informal, whether with specific rules around campaigning, or whether it goes as far as standing down candidates, could have an impact in certain areas. But sometimes that's seen as a magic bullet, when in actual fact the reality can be far different, and people may vote for one party but then choose not to vote at all, rather than voting for the other party. And so it's not necessarily the solution that some people see it as.
Sure. OK, that's really, really interesting. Thank you for that. And I guess just finally, sort of quite a lot of chatter, Joe, about Tory MPs sort of starting to almost sort of conspire to see if there is going to be a leadership challenge. Talk about a dinner in Chelsea this week between lots of sort of centrist MPs. One journalist in the Mail on Sunday said it's time for them to put up or shut up. Is this just media noise? Are you hearing anything more about some sort of, some evidence behind that?
Well, there are clearly reports that some MPs are upset. But the important thing to remember, to put all these numbers that I've talked about in context, is the fact that, as I said, there is not a general election today. There is not a general election tomorrow. There doesn't have to be a general election for nearly 2 years. And so the question that all of these MPs will be asking, Conservative, Labour or any other colour, is where will they themselves and their party be once the general election comes around? And the Tory MPs have had motive to replace Boris Johnson for some time now, whether it's Sue Gray report or the fines for Partygate, or indeed all that has happened around the cost of living crisis. The question they have, though, is if not him, then who? Then who? There is no obvious replacement, and so would they just go in to dethrone him and see what happens? Well, that hasn't necessarily worked out for the party particularly well in the past.
Interesting.
And can anyone do better?
Interesting. If not him, then who? Joe Twyman, thank you so much for those thoughts. He's the co-founder of Delta Poll. But give us a call or send a message with your thoughts. Just going back to the benefits point I was touching on earlier, and a really good point made by someone with the initials NC, who says, my wife nearly died of a brain hemorrhage at 44, still well within working age, but left unable to leave the house, let alone work. 2 young children, been in work since 19, paid taxes, national insurance. So thank heavens for benefits. Actually used a slightly ruder word than that, but there we are. It's a family show, which kept our family at home. So, of course, as that message quite rightly says, some people absolutely are genuine, and that's what the whole point of the benefit system is to help those in genuine need. My concern is that, particularly after the COVID pandemic, too many people have found a way to do less work and rely on benefits, and that feels wrong. But let's see what Mark in Lincolnshire thinks. Hi there, Mark. Have we got Mark? We think we've lost Mark. I was hoping we had Mark in Lincolnshire with some thoughts. Meanwhile, Angela says, I like this. Angela says, if all the unemployment offices did a survey to find out why people were unemployed, some are just unemployable. Others may be able to fill skills shortages by retraining rather than bringing people in via immigration. I'd like to help on that project. I'm sure a bit of that does go on, but there's clearly something wrong. That number of people on out-of-work benefits of working age just feels wrong. Something is out of kilter. Mark, I think, is back from Lincolnshire. Hi there, Mark.
Hi, Richard. Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Don't worry, you probably popped off to get a cup of tea. I kept you waiting too long. What's on your mind?
Well, it's just all this. Somebody you was saying earlier on, 5.8 million people who aren't working, who don't seem to be able to get a job, and of course, obviously, were all these the same sort of people that were saying, oh well, it's all the Eastern Europeans that are here taking our jobs. Why aren't we in a situation where we're literally saying to people, yeah, fine, look, you can have unemployment benefit because I appreciate that you've been made redundant or you've lost your job. So for 3 years, you're going to get unemployment benefit. And then I'm afraid you're on your own. Because if you can't get a job in 3 years, you either need to go on to incapacity, as I think you mentioned earlier on about the 44-year-old lady. There are genuine circumstances out there. But there are people out there, and I've got people, I know people that have just, unfortunately, haven't worked since the 90s.
Yeah, and that's incredible. That's desperate, and it's so bad for society, so bad for people's own confidence, their mental health.
Absolutely.
So everyone's a loser in that scenario.
You need it, don't you? You need to be able to do something. We're human. We need to be able to, whether it's from walking out the cave or walking out the Victorian house, you need to have a
I agree. My incentive is, my view is, you want to look forward to waking up in the morning. And that means you've got to contribute, you've got to be doing something, whatever it is. Mark, thank you so much for those thoughts. I really do feel, of course, there are many, many people who genuinely have, through ill health or whatever, have fallen on hard times, or the business they work for has gone bust, of course. But we've got to provide an incentive. We've got to encourage people back into work. Something is badly out of kilter. 1.5 million more people on working age, on benefits, out of work benefits, since the referendum. Give us a call with your views. What's gone wrong? Are we heading towards socialism? Are we there yet? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? You know the number. Stay with us at the home of common sense. It's Tice Talk here at Talk TV.
TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 11.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. Liverpool are demanding answers after the chaotic scenes outside the Paris Stadium before the Reds' defeat at the Champions League final. Fans struggled to get into the Stade de France, causing a 30-minute delay to kick off. Police used tear gas to disperse the crowd, clogging up the gates. Witnesses are blaming poor organisation at the ground, but UEFA have said fans caused the hold-up because they were trying to enter with fake tickets. Liverpool have refuted the claims. Real Madrid scooped their 14th European Cup after defeating Liverpool 1-0. Manager Jurgen Klopp spoke about the delays before the game following the match.
I know that the families had real struggles to get into the stadium, but the reasons, I don't know yet. But I heard that we will have, what is they're saying for that, further investigations to figure out what's going on there. I heard a few things they were not good, not nice. Obviously, that was pretty tricky out there, but I don't know. I don't know more about it.
Downing Street have denied putting pressure on Sue Gray to dilute her report into lockdown-breaking parties ahead of its publication. The Sunday Times is reporting that senior civil servants tried to have some names excluded, claiming the so-called ABBA party held in the Prime Minister's flat on November the 13th, 2020, was tweaked by Boris Johnson's Chief of Staff, Steve Barclay. In Brazil, at least 35 people have been killed after a landslide. Heavy rain in the northeast state of Pernambuco caused the hillside to collapse in a suburb of Recife. Many locations in the city are vulnerable to mudslides. President Bolsonaro is preparing to dispatch a federal task force to help the salvage operation. And in Nepal, a plane carrying 22 people has gone missing. The small private aircraft from Tara Air, similar to this one, was flying from the tourist town of Polhara, around 120 miles from the capital, Kathmandu. An airline official said passengers included Indian nationals. Nepal has a record of air accidents with its changeable weather conditions and airstrips in mountain locations. The race is on to stop an oil spill on the Devon coast after a fire on a super yacht. The vessel, which is carrying around 8,000 litres of fuel, sank in a Torquay marina after the blaze yesterday. Dramatic images showed thick plumes of black smoke billowing across the harbour as flames engulfed the boat. And former champion jockey Lester Piggott, widely considered one of the greatest of all time, has died at the age of 86. He won the Epsom Derby 9 times and was crowned British champion jockey 11 times, going on to accumulate more than 4,000 horse racing victories. His family confirmed he passed away peacefully in Switzerland this morning. Now time for today's weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
This morning it will be a cooler feeling and generally cloudier day compared to Saturday, with showers developing across many areas. So these locally heavy, possibly thundery in the south and southwest. In Scotland, there's a mix of bright or sunny spells and scattered showers. The showers and cloudiest conditions being in the north and east. Moving south, and Northern Ireland will be mostly dry with sunny spells, but Northern England will be rather cloudy, especially in the east. There'll also be scattered showers, although many places will remain dry. Wales and the Midlands will also be rather cloudy with limited sunshine. There'll be a scattering of showers here, with the heaviest, possibly thundery, across southern Wales. There's little change as we head across southern England. The heaviest showers with a risk of hail or thunder across southwest England. Showers will ease later as bright or sunny spells also develop, feeling cooler than of late.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
I think the topic that I'd like more people to be thinking about is definitely health and social care. You know, we have an outrageous system where we don't look after our elderly in the way we should. We've got to have a proper grown-up and honest conversation about that.
Welcome back to Tice Talk. We have cruised rapidly into the second hour of the show. The phones are buzzing, tweets are flying in at pace. People have really got going this morning with my Sunday sermon. Is it Rishi Corbyn? Is it Comrade Sunak? Do we want a bigger state? One message here that's come in from Brexit Duck. I think we know which side he or she voted. I voted Conservative and got Communists. Who wants... what's next? A universal basic income. I want a small state, not a nanny state. Well, that's a good point. Another really good question here from, I think it's Namron Pro EU Rejoin. There are 1.26 million people out of work in the UK to March 2022. So where's the 5 million number come from? Well, this is the conundrum. The official unemployment statistics, I think, is that 1.26 million number. And yet... there are millions more on out-of-work benefits of working-age population who don't feature within the official unemployment numbers. And that's the conundrum. That's what I want answered, because I just know something is wrong. The population of the country is at a record high, and we've got, last year in 2021, we've got record high numbers of visas granted, long-term visas to come and essentially live and work in the United Kingdom, of almost 1 million granted. And so that's why I'm delighted to be joined in the studio this morning by Out Mehmet, who is, of course, chairman of Migration Watch, great friend and contributor to Talk TV. Out, very good Sunday morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Richard.
So, in a sense, I think we're all slightly confused by some of these numbers. That statistic I got, I think, is from the ONS, that 5.3 million are on out-of-work benefits. And yet we've got, we're told that we've got more vacancies than we've got people on unemployment benefits. And yet we've now got record numbers of people, almost 1 million visas granted last year. Legally, this is lawful immigration we're talking about, not the sort of the illegal immigration across the channel. What's going on with these record numbers? How can we have more visas granted than ever before, and yet there seems to be a shortfall in labour force?
Well, first of all, not all the 1 million visas granted, actually it was a little bit more than that, were for people to come here to work. That's one thing. However, those who came for other reasons, for example, students or those who are coming to study here, firstly, they are able to work, and they do, particularly in the sort of lower paid, less skill required jobs. Then there are those who actually do come here to work. There is the family of those who come for other reasons who are able to work. So there are thousands and thousands of people who are able to come here to work. However, for me, the main problem is the fact that when we introduced the points-based system, this magic system that a lot of people said would solve all our immigration problems.
Myself included.
Yourself included. However, to be fair to you and others who are saying it, they probably had in mind, you probably had in mind a different sort of points-based system to the one that was actually introduced. What has happened now is that the skill requirements, the salary requirements, all those have been lowered.
Been dumbed down.
Dumbed down. Qualifications have sort of, for skill visas, they've been lowered from roughly degree level to A level. Those who are coming here to work in particular jobs, the requirement for them to be earning a certain level, that was reduced. Then employers no longer have to look locally first before they offer jobs to people overseas, and there is no limit to the number that employers actually can bring in. So why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they look for people overseas, or indeed those who are already here, who are prepared to do these jobs at less money in difficult conditions sometimes?
Yes, but this is the conundrum, isn't it? We've got record numbers of lawful immigration, and I suppose would almost all of the visas that are granted, would they actually come to the United Kingdom? Or are there many people that get a visa but then don't come?
A few. But the fact is that they wouldn't apply for visas to come here if they didn't intend coming.
And to be clear, for example, I think there's over 400,000 student visas granted, and that's for, let's say, a 3-year degree.
466,000.
460,000, but then they can stay afterwards for a couple of years?
Indeed, yeah. This is it. People say, students shouldn't count. Well, of course students should count. They come here for 3, 4, 5 years, and then on completion of their studies, they can stay on for an additional 2 years. That's gone up from 1 year to 2 years. That's batty, absolutely batty.
And can they bring in family members as well?
They can bring family members eventually. I mean, some of them can, not all of them by any means, but even that number has shot up as well. So yes, a number of students does make a significant difference. They all need a place to live, for goodness sake.
Exactly.
But just on those who actually stay on for 2 years, the interesting thing is that they don't have to stay on to do sort of, I don't know, the high-skilled jobs for which presumably they've been trained. They can do any job at all, even if it's only to stack shelves at supermarkets.
And many may say, that's great. That's a free market working. But this is the conundrum where, you know, the ONS figures are saying there's over 5 million on out-of-work benefits, and yet we're being told by businesses and by the government that we need to have record numbers of visas issued under the points-based system, where the threshold for salary levels is, I checked, I mean, some of them are down at 22, 23, 24,000 pounds a year, when the average national salary is, give or take, 30,000. And so this is the conundrum. You've got ever more people coming in, needing somewhere to live, and obviously from time to time, someone might need, you know, some healthcare, you know, or they might need to go to hospital. So that consumes public sector capacity and infrastructure, and the population grows ever larger, and yet we're being told there's a shortage of workers.
Yeah, absolutely. There isn't a shortage of workers. There is a shortage of employers prepared to pay enough, frankly. If people earned enough, and it wasn't in all sorts of difficult circumstances that they had to do the jobs, there would be... And this was the Migration Advisory Committee saying that a few years ago. Pay enough, improve the conditions, and you'll have all the workers you want. Why would someone really take less money, work in very difficult conditions, when they can be getting benefits at a higher level? Why would they?
And this is the conundrum, and it seems to me that there isn't a big enough gap between the incentive to work. And I had a really diligent nurse on the phone earlier, working in London, who's been in nursing for many, many years and now working overtime and extra hours, but not feeling that making any progress at all with inflation. And you know, that's tragic. A, because it's such a noble role, such a noble cause, and you think if you're working ever harder and you're working more overtime, you should feel you're making some progress. And I just feel that the government's giveaway this week, you know, it's a state handout, it's a subsidy culture to so many people, rather than giving people an extra incentive to work by cutting taxes.
No, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned nurses, but my daughter is a nurse, so I know a little bit about it. She's had to leave the profession effectively, although she's still a qualified nurse, to do another job because she needs the money. She's got 4 children. She's got a mortgage to pay. Of course she's going to have to look for a job that pays enough money. There's a shortage of something like 40,000 nurses there was in 2020. And yet, we actually turned away 23,000 applicants for nursing courses in the same year.
In the UK?
In the UK. That's crazy. But do you know how many migrants actually registered with GPs between 2010 and 2019, 2020?
Help me, I suspect you know the number.
7 million.
7
million.
So 7 million additional people...
Yeah.
...registered, and so, but they does that include... Brits as well, or is that 7 million non-British
7
citizens?
million migrants, 7 million foreigners, if you like, for want of a better word.
So that's almost the whole of population growth.
And that's when the number of doctors we had between 2014 and 2019 actually fell by 1,700. We're not training enough. We're not training sufficient numbers of medical staff. That's why there's a shortage. Add to that the growing population, and that's where you get the pressures.
And if we were properly training, we've got millions on out-of-work benefits. If we were giving incentive for some of those to go and help in these vital roles, then that would reduce the pressure for lawful immigration. That would then reduce the pressure on public services and housing and so on and on and on.
Well, exactly. I mean, migration, when people say, oh, these people are good, they come here and work. Well, what about their housing? What about their medical attention? What about the congestion that they add to? What about the schools required, the numbers of children who are requiring schools? And on top of that, of course, we're now saying to really 5 million Hong Kongers.
Yes.
You can come here. We are saying to Ukraine people, quite rightly, we're affording refuge to those fleeing,
and those proper avenues of sensible, rightful immigration, whether it's temporary or permanent. But I think people's appetite for that diminishes if we're getting things wrong, either through illegal immigration across the Channel or by having too many people coming through other lawful routes.
Indeed, illegal immigration across the Channel 3 times what it was this time last year, when we had record numbers anyway. We're looking to anything up to 90,000 actually crossing the Channel this year at the present rate, if it continues.
At the present rate, costing us billions and billions of pounds.
Indeed.
It just feels to me that we've got this so out of kilter. We've got so many brilliant people that we need to encourage to work here in the UK, and we're missing out on that. Out Mehmet, the chairman of Migration Watch, thank you so much for that. Those thoughts on the huge numbers, the record numbers of lawful migration last year in 2021, almost 1 million people. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000 with your thoughts. After the break, we'll be taking your calls, your messages, your tweets. You know the number. It's Tice Talk. It is, of course, Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. We are well into the second hour. That was Out Mehmet with his thoughts about the record numbers of lawful immigration in 2021. And just during the break, he reminded me that actually that number is 56% higher than the 2019 number. So since Boris Johnson and Priti Patel have introduced the points-based system actually that has led to a dramatic increase, which was completely opposite to the promise to the British people. We've got some great messages coming in from, where's one from Pablo, who says, a vote for Tories is a vote for net zero. A vote for Labour is a vote for net zero. We'll be coming back to that in the third hour. We're going to be talking about energy. We're going to be talking about climate and alternatives. Trevor says it's Comrade Rishi for me, although you have to wonder if he's only as good as the civil servants who serve him. A very good point there. Let's go down to Ealing, where Stephen is on the line. Hi, Stephen.
Hi there, Richard. How you doing?
Well, I'm a bit anxious, as you may have heard this morning, Stephen. But...
Yeah, absolutely. And you just gave a record number. I'll give you another record number. We've currently got a greater number of vacancies than we've ever had before. In April, it was just under 1.3 million vacancies, unfilled vacancies. And I work in HR, and I can tell you, we've got an absolute recruitment crisis at the moment. We simply cannot fill jobs. The number of applicants is down. We put jobs out, and sometimes we don't get a single applicant. People withdraw, people fall out, people don't accept offers when we make them. We've got an absolute recruitment crisis.
Stephen, this is brilliant. Thank you so much for that intel. So what are you putting that down to? Because I can't compute what's wrong here. We've got a record population, we've got record people lawfully coming to the UK to work and to contribute and to live, and yet you've got record vacancies and you guys are struggling to fill the jobs.
Yeah, I mean, another record figure is, I believe, we've got more people in employment than we've ever had. So, in a way, I think that the supply is not meeting the demand for labour. And clearly, I think something we need to tackle, which I know you've already talked about, is, this rump of people who just don't want to work. I know people or know of people who've never worked since leaving school, and, and they're now in their 40s. This rump of people have to be tackled. In this current situation.
It's absolutely insane. It really is. I've got another concern, and if you're in HR and recruitment, you may help or tell me I'm wrong, which is, are there many jobs at what I would call low productive jobs? Because the truth is, sort of last mile delivery jobs, the getters of this world, where you can get a lettuce delivered to your door in 10 minutes, it's not actually very productive. It's not very creative. It's sort of, okay, you can sit at home and get a pizza delivered to your door, but where's the creativity and the value being created? And is that consuming a chunk of the workforce that could be doing something more productive?
Oh, I'm sure you're right, because, I think the biggest area of sort of increase in employment is in that sort of jobs. Your Amazon delivery, your pizza deliveries, as you say, very, very low skill roles. And are we creating those more value-add roles in society that are actually going to add to the economy? But then I guess, we're all to blame, because we all want to sit on our backsides at home and order a pizza and order, not go down the shops anymore.
Speak for yourself, Stephen. I've never done it. Never done it, and I don't intend to start. I think something's wrong, but Stephen, thank you very much for your call. He's given us a record number, which is that there are 1.3 million vacancies. That does sound high. That sounds like a record. Thank you for that, Stephen. Now we're going to head west to gorgeous Berkshire, where Cleo is. Good morning, Cleo. Have we got Cleo?
Hello.
Hi there, Cleo. Yes, good morning. You're on Talk TV. How are you feeling? What would you like to say?
Good morning. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm anxious this morning. Something's not quite right in some of these numbers, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, so, I have a view. So I was interested when I heard your stat of, I think, 5.9 million on benefits. So I had a look at the...
Yeah, 5.3 million.
Well, so according to the .gov website, it's 5.9 million on universal credit, but 9.5 million working-age adults claiming in-work benefits. And I think the problem that I see so I'm 52, but I know a lot of people who are kind of early 30s, is they don't think they should have to work full-time. They don't believe in working full-time. We saw my husband's nephew a couple of weeks ago. He's 31. He and his wife both have very good jobs. They both went to Edinburgh University. They both choose to work 2.5 days a week and have done since they were 29 because, and I quote, well, I don't really like working. And that attitude is prevalent, in my view, in younger people. I see it everywhere. I see it when I go to the hairdresser. The younger people, they choose to work fewer hours. My sister, one of her friends, He works in a library 1 day a week because he likes to travel. He claims benefits, and because, again, you can get in-work benefits. You can get your rent paid, you can get working tax credits, child tax credits. So people can maintain a very good standard of living if they are prepared to work part-time because of the benefits available. And the simple fact is, in the rest of Europe, this kind of system doesn't exist. They have contributory systems in the rest of Europe. And I think if you want to work part-time, I have no problem with people working part-time. I have a very big problem with people working part-time and A, claiming benefits, and B, the cost. So, for example, they don't think about the fact if they have children, the cost of their education, the cost of the NHS. Meanwhile, the ever-dwindling number of full-time workers, so my husband and I are both in our 50s, we've both worked full-time all of our lives, we don't have children, we are simply not a cost on the state, we never have been, and yet we were raised with the idea that you have a work ethic and you work full time when you're working age and healthy because you can, you pay in. Yeah. But that attitude is disappearing in the younger generation.
I mean, silly us, Cleo. I've worked all my life. I've never claimed either. You know, silly us having an old-fashioned attitude that, you know, if you work harder for longer during the week, you're going to earn more, and we won't take money off the state. Cleo, that was a great call. Thank you so much indeed for that. And Cleo referred to some statistics there. I'm using DWP statistics that says 5.3 million out-of-work benefits. There's obviously others on in-work benefits. Something has gone badly wrong. This is Corbynomics on steroids, and Comrade Sunak and others are responsible. John in Hampshire is there. Morning, John.
Morning, Richard. I agree with you entirely. He should have raised the tax threshold to 20,000, even beyond.
Because interestingly, of course, an income tax was originally a tax for the rich, and at 20,000 a year, that's still 2/3 of the annual salary. So it's actually still a tax on the poor.
He's giving away a maximum of 1,200 quid, isn't he? Well, if you do the maths, from 12,500 up to 18,500, 6,000, divide 6,000 by 20%, it's 1,200 quid.
Yeah. So 20 grand is 1,500 quid, give or take 30 quid a week.
Yeah, and I would go further. I would make it. I'd go maybe to 25,000, and then people would go to work. We could ease off these benefits and give people more money in their pockets from working.
That's the point, isn't it? You dramatically change the equation between working and sitting at home on your backside.
I wouldn't pay in-work benefits. No in-work benefits.
Well, that's right. If you make it that attractive to work, yeah, then I think it's a really good point, John. We've got something badly wrong, haven't we?
Oh, mate, this lot could not. They could not run a Welk store. They could not organise a drink up in Tesco's. They just. I don't know what's wrong.
But hang on, John. But surely, John, they can run a good party in a big building. With cheese and wine and orange juice and all sorts, when everybody else has got to stay at home and not be everywhere. Hey?
I stand corrected. Pass the gin.
Pass the gin or the 7 bottles of wine, and that was just the photos that we did see. It appears that there was a number of things were actually sort of redacted and taken out of the report. John, great call. Thank you so much. I think you, like me, are a bit frustrated. I want other people. We're getting some fantastic calls this morning about different examples. Look, if you want to work part-time, that's great. If you've won the lottery, you've had you've inherited some money from someone, fantastic. But don't expect us, people who work full-time, to pay for it. I think that's fairly reasonable, don't you? Give us a call. You know the number. You're listening to Tice Talk here on Talk TV.
I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk TV. I think my most memorable and proudest moment in journalism over all these years is actually being on air during the lockdowns, even when I had COVID myself. Over the last 2 years, getting people to tell their stories, not just about people who lost loved ones to COVID, but people who lost their fundamental freedoms, their children's schooling, their mental health, their physical health, their businesses, and giving people the chance to tell their stories about how it affected them.
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. Liverpool are demanding answers after the chaotic scenes outside the Paris Stadium before the Reds' defeat at the Champions League final. Fans struggled to get into the Stade de France, causing a 30-minute delay to kick off. Police used tear gas to disperse the crowd, clogging up the gates. Witnesses are blaming poor organisation at the ground. But UEFA have said fans caused the hold-up because they were trying to enter with fake tickets. Liverpool refute this. Real Madrid scooped their 14th European Cup after defeating Liverpool 1-0. Manager Jurgen Klopp spoke about the delays before the game following the match.
I know that the families had real struggles to get into the stadium, but the reasons, I don't know yet. But I heard that we will have, what is they saying for that, further investigations to figure out what's going on there. I heard a few things that were not good, not nice. Obviously, that was pretty tricky out there, but I don't know. I don't know more about it.
In Brazil, at least 35 people have been killed after a landslide. Heavy rain in the northeast state of Pernambuco caused the hillside to collapse in a suburb of Recife. Many locations in the city are vulnerable to mudslides. The race is on to stop an oil spill on the Devon coast after a fire on a super yacht. The vessel, which is carrying around 8,000 litres of fuel, sank in a Torquay marina after the blaze yesterday. Dramatic images showed thick plumes of black smoke billowing across the harbour as flames engulfed the boat. And former champion jockey Lester Piggott, widely considered one of the greatest of all time, has died at the age of 86. He won the Epsom Derby 9 times and was crowned British champion jockey 11 times, going on to accumulate more than 4,000 horse racing victories. His family confirmed he passed away peacefully in Switzerland this morning. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're well into the second hour of the show. Lots of messages coming in, lots of great calls there about the problems, the lack of incentive with the benefit system. But it's good to have both sides, different views. Sam Cole, he sent a couple of tweets, so let's go through those, Sam. Thanks for listening and watching. First one says, Tice not speaking of a proper living wage, nor that capitalism is a Ponzi scam. Really, Sam? Obviously, if one is a 1% winner, why would you want anyone else to share the spoils of abuse? Sam, let me put it as I see it, which is that if you grow the cake ever larger, then everyone can benefit. Everyone who's got a piece of the cake benefits if you grow the cake. So what I'm saying is, let's grow the cake faster, then everybody is a winner. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. It really, really doesn't. But to do that, you've got to be more productive. You've got to grow the cake bigger, faster, further. That's what countries like Australia and Singapore and America, surprise, surprise, they have much lower taxes than we have. And guess what? Yes, their economies grow much faster than ours over a 10 to 15-year period. And with that means you get higher growth, higher tax revenues, higher wages, and sure enough, you can invest more in public services. Sam went on to say, of course, Tice hates socialism, unless it's directed at the wealthy. For the rest of you, it's exploitation by the capitalists. No, Sam, absolutely not. If you look at, my policies, I'm saying that actually what you do is you cut taxes dramatically for the lowest paid, the least well off. You cut taxes for the smaller businesses, not the big businesses. That's the way you actually put money into more people's pockets, and then they can make the decision how to spend their own money on themselves or on their small business as a self-employed person, rather than rely on state handouts or think that civil servants might spend their money better than they would. That's the point, Sam. But do tweet us if you want, or give us a call to discuss it further. Anyway, we are going to change tack because we've been talking domestically, but we now also need to look at what's going on internationally, and of course the Ukraine situation, the Russia situation. It's on the news every day. We're months into this. What I fear is a very long-term war. And, I've been talking earlier about incentives. And at the moment, I can't see any incentive for Putin to stop this terrible, hideous war, which is it's so brutal. And he's just gradually killing more and more people. On both sides, of course. Russia's losing lots of soldiers. Ukraine I mean, they're losing hundreds of soldiers every day. That hardly ever gets reported. And, of course, thousands of civilians. The devastation, the destruction is utterly horrendous. And what I really wanted to look at was, what is the incentive for Putin to stop? And are the sanctions in any way working? That's the real thing, because we've talked before about the sanctions from the West on whether or not, whether or not we should, for example, be buying any goods from Russia. There's the issue of dependency on oil and gas from Russia, from the European nations. And the West showed some unity imposing sanctions, but for some, I'm not convinced that they're working. Now, have they been properly imposed, or have too many of them just been talked about as a good headline, but not actually been properly enacted? Where's the pressure coming from the oligarchs who've had assets frozen, football clubs taken away from them, yachts taken away from them, homes taken away from them? Are they putting any pressure on Putin? At the moment, it doesn't seem so. And so I'm hoping that we're going to be talking to Bill Browder, who's a real expert in this field. But looking at my wonderful production team, I think they are struggling to get him on the line. So we'll keep waiting. He might actually be there. I'm just getting a wave. No, he's not quite there. So that's fine. Meanwhile, I've got more messages coming in. One here, I like this actually, from Ms. Magoo. There's no such thing as in-work benefits. There should be no such thing. And then there wouldn't be if companies paid a living wage. Too many companies are paying executives bonuses and shareholders dividends while paying employees the minimum wage. This is it's a really interesting point, actually. Paying the companies minimum wage, that's the wrong way about things and shouldn't be allowed. And I think it's a really good point. But if you've got a limited supply of labour and there's the demand, then actually what happens is wages go up. That's what should happen. If you allow ever more immigration, then, of course, that actually depresses wages. I'm delighted to say we have now got Bill on the line. Good morning, Bill. Thanks for joining us. Very nice to have you with us on Tice Talk. We spoke a while ago, Bill, about sanctions, and you quite rightly were very keen that sanctions should be put on oligarchs and things. We're months into this campaign now, and my sort of simple question is, are these sanctions working, or are they not being properly imposed to create any incentive on Putin to change tack?
Well, I think you used the exact right word, incentive. So sanctions have two possible functions. They can either be used for deterrence, or to use the word you just made, incentive, or they can be used for punishment. And had we used sanctions before the invasion, it would have created a deterrence, because Putin could have looked at it and said, okay, here's the benefit, here's the cost. The cost will be high. I'm not going to do it. And he had good reason to believe that we weren't going to do sanctions, because for the last 22 years, we've effectively not done sanctions. So we kind of lost our opportunity for deterrence by not using the sanctions before the invasion. And so the second purpose of sanctions is punishment. And it's not just punishment from a moral standpoint, because that doesn't really help anything. It's punishment from a practical standpoint, which is that if we want Putin to stop this war, at this point, we have to deplete his resources to fight the war. And sanctioning the oligarchs is certainly part of that. And I think that what we've done so far has been good. Although, having said that, we've only sanctioned about 35 of the richest oligarchs, and there's 118 of them around. But the other main sanction that we have to do, and when I say we, I mean we, the West, is we've got to stop sending Putin $1 billion a day.
Indeed.
And that's kind of the key to the whole thing. And so if you look at it from if you were to look at it as a business question or a business puzzle to solve, on one side, we've dealt with the assets or his savings. So the West has sanctioned his central bank reserves, and we've got about 65% of them frozen. And we've sanctioned some of the biggest oligarchs like Abramovich and Deripaska, which has helped freeze his access to offshore capital.
But that's not having any real effect, it seems.
Right, because we're not touching the income. So it's like if you go after somebody, and so it costs him $1 billion a day to fight this war, and we send him $1 billion a day, and so he doesn't have to dip into his savings. We've dealt with his savings, but not his income.
But in truth, there's no likelihood of that reducing that rapidly, because the likes of Germany and Italy are far too dependent on his gas.
Indeed, we have to really lean on them hard, and they have to do the right thing. And I wouldn't say that they're not going to stop buying his oil and gas. I mean, there's been very, I would say, robust talk about stop buying the oil. I mean, there's a few.
That's easier, isn't it? Yeah,
that's easier. That's about 20% of it. Gas is a much trickier issue because, I mean, and I'm not unsympathetic to the Germans, that there are some businesses and companies that would effectively go out of business if they don't have Russian gas.
That's right, but they were just hugely naive. I know, before we go, Bill, you've just got a new book out, haven't you, that was launched, I think, last month, Freezing Order. Just tell us a bit about that book for my viewers and listeners.
So basically, what I've done over the last 12 years is tried to go after Russia for killing my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky. And one of the ways I decided to do that was as Sergei discovered a massive $230 million Russian government fraud. And so we said, where did that money go? And through this book, we've traced the money. We found the money. We found some of the money went to Putin. And he's ended up going after me and a lot of other people connected to me. And the book is really a real-life thriller about how this exposing Putin's corruption, and it's not only important to read, but it's also, I would say, entertaining to read, which is not a nice thing to say about murder.
No, I know, but Bill, I read your first book, Red Notice, which was a thriller in itself. So I'm going to look forward to reading that. Freezing Order, a story of money laundering, murder and surviving Vladimir Putin's wrath, by Bill Browder. Bill, thank you so much for those thoughts. Extraordinary. Stay with us. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Coming up after the break, we've got to talk about the Champions League football. It's Tice Talk on Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. We are approaching the end of the second hour. We're rattling through some great tweets and messages, calls coming in. Good one here from Stephen. Stephen says, you think money makes the world go round. It isn't. It's hunger for love, food and fun. Look, it's a great message. I think the inference there is, yes, we all want love, food and fun, and that's fantastic, but how are you going to pay for it? It doesn't come for free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. In my view, somehow things have to be earned and paid for. And yes, we all want love, food and fun, but someone somewhere has actually got to pay for it. Meanwhile, Christina says, it's the benefit system that needs a complete overhaul. No one should be worse off for going to work. Go over 16 hours and you are in trouble. She uses a different word, but there we are. I'm trying to keep it clean. Currently, that's what's happening. Where is the incentive for this, people? That is a really good point. We're going to go up north to Bolton, where Earl is on the line. How are we, Earl? Are you all right? Are we there, Earl?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
I can. How are you? What's going on? How's sunny Bolton?
In Bolton, it's trying to rain at the moment where I live, but
well,
we'll survive.
You'll survive. Excellent. What's on your mind?
Right, I'm listening with great interest to all your speakers before, and you've had a lot of great speakers on about the benefits and so forth, and the job list. Now, I think we've too many sponges and lazy so-and-sos in the country, but there always have been. Even back to the 60s when I started work, there were. The trouble is, we used to have we've got loads of vacancies for everybody, but all the job centres have closed over the years. There's no job centres, and there are no jobs advertised in the local press. So those were two places where the normal people could go and get a job if they just felt like it at any time. And the only other thing is the benefit sheets, they're just massive now in the numbers, and they're fiddling housing and all sorts of things. But there's nowhere where anybody can complain or tell the authorities
Yes.
about that.
A sort of whistleblowing service.
You can't ring a phone number and say, oh, Fred Boggs at such a number is fiddling his benefits, or he shouldn't be living in that house, he's got somebody living with him, and things like that. You cannot ring a number. It has to go to a national leave. And we've got to crack down on these people, that's all.
Well, you're right. The truth is you'll probably go to a call waiting service that says you're 50th in line and they're working from home.
A bit like yours.
And that's a bit of a problem. Earl, thank you so much for that thought there. That was Earl from Bolton, where it's raining. Meanwhile, now, I'm a little bit sad because obviously my beloved Liverpool, they lost last night, despite playing some great football, particularly in the first half. So I'm delighted to be joined now by the football editor at The Sun, Charlie Wyatt. Charlie, a good but sad morning for us Liverpool fans, given last night. Tell us your thoughts about what went on, not only inside the stadium, but also grimly outside the stadium.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, outside, I mean, I'm still in Chantilly, actually, just north of Paris, where England were based for Euro 2016, and it took 40 minutes to get to the stadium and then an hour and a half to travel about 200 metres in the car. We had to ditch the car. We couldn't even get to the official parking spaces because it was such a shambles. And then it took another hour and a half just to snake round. There's fans being squeezed against fences. The organisation was really poor. Obviously, it doesn't help if there are fans with fake tickets. But equally, it was I was amazed how close all the supporters could get to the stadium, whereas I was at the final in 2016 and there was an extra layer of security, so they didn't bother for this one. So, yeah, it wasn't great, inside or outside the grounds, to be honest. We had these big matches and we're still having major issues. So you've got to blame the supporters, but you've got to also look at the police and the organisers. UEFA are getting a lot of blame, but I actually think it's the actual people that were operating the Stade de France in the same way that you have to blame our FA and our police for the problems at Euro 2020.
Indeed. And Charlie, I heard that it wasn't as bad at the Real Madrid end. Is that true, or is that not the case, do you think?
It's not. So, I mean, I think that the numbers, I'd say about a third of the supporters in the stadium were Real Madrid fans. And it certainly did appear that the larger numbers of fans in the so-called neutral areas were Liverpool supporters. But also, I think the fake tickets issue was amongst the English fans.
So you think that's a real issue, the question of fake tickets?
Well, the other problem is, though, that, and we found, because we were trying to get into the media areas, you've got lots of people on TV, like Gary Lineker couldn't get into the ground. And it seemed to be that where the media was and where the Liverpool fans were, half the stadium was being funneled into a much tighter area compared to the Real Madrid side, which was way more open, and there were car parks and coach parks. So there is a slightly different surrounding area. So the fans from one end were being sort of squeezed into a area. So I think that's to do with the fact, as much as the numbers of fans, that everyone was being sent into the wrong area.
I mean, it's extraordinary. It's not like this is the first time the stadium's been full. It's used week in, week out for full events. It just matters. Charlie, let's focus on what went on inside the stadium, because there was some great football, some amazing saves by Courtois, and some great skills. What were your thoughts on the game itself?
I thought Liverpool started off terrifically well. I thought after about 10 minutes it was going to be a 3-0 Liverpool win. Real Madrid were negative, they were defensive, didn't offer anything. Liverpool created some chances, as you say. Courtois made a couple of good saves in the first half. An unbelievable one from Sadio Mane. And then that 5 minutes before half-time, where they scored a goal with Benzema, it was controversially disallowed. And the game changed then. And in the second half, Real Madrid had more confidence. Their experience shone through. Even so, Courtois made, 3 great saves again from Salah. He was unplayable. And, of course, Liverpool have won 2 finals on penalties this season.
Yes.
I think even if the game had gone to spot kicks, I think Thibaut Courtois would have saved every single one of them. He was just absolutely unbeatable. I think Liverpool have lost the final, would have played quite well. They're a very different team from the one that lost to Real Madrid 4 years ago in Kiev. They're reaching their peak. They may not even be at it yet. Manchester City are going to sign Erling Haaland, or they've signed him. Liverpool, I think the key is whether they avoid a hangover going into next season. But they're still an amazing team.
So near, but so far, Charlie. That was my feeling.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's been a tough 6 days, or 7 days for the club.
Tough 6 days, indeed.
Yeah.
Charlie, thank you so much for your thoughts.
All the best.
Safe travels getting back to the UK. That was Charlie Wyatt, the football editor at The Sun, with his thoughts on last night's game. We're going to head back up north to York before we get to the top of the hour, because Mike is there on the line. Morning, Mike.
Good morning, Richard. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm a bit anxious, as you may have heard, but there we are. Maybe you can brighten my morning.
Dead easy. And it's a simple way of doing it. We just adopt, like the US, a sales tax. Dump VAT, because it's one of the most fraudulent systems you can have. Adopt the US system of sales tax. And you can even target things for where people are struggling with the poor. So your sales tax can range from anything from 2% to 10%. You can have it regionally, like America does.
That's right. But how does a sales tax differ from VAT, Mike?
Well, for a start, the guy that you had on earlier, he spends a lot of time doing VAT. Sales tax is at the point of the consumers when he buys it. That's when the tax comes in. So all those other companies behind that sales tax in America, they don't get involved. They don't have to spend a lot of money on personnel and systems to mess about with the VAT. Whereas this country, all along the line, you've got to employ people to...
Yes, to sort of to do the VAT returns and all of that. That's an interesting point. And there is lots of regionalisation of sales tax in America. Maybe we're not quite big enough to have that level of variation.
Well, here's another point. I know lots of people, and I was one of them, that would avoid VAT like the plague. So what I used to do, and everybody else I knew, once you're getting up to £80,000, you stop working. So if you had a good year and you're up to 80,000 by, say, January, you take the rest of the year off.
There you are.
That's it. Just how simple the daft system of VAT. Can I just say one other thing, Richard?
Go for it, Mike.
OK, I've dealt with a load of people in civil servants and whatever, and they might have degrees in history and geography, but when it comes to economics, they've got zilch in common sense. And that's the problem that this country's got. There's nobody like yourself who've got knowledge and experience in business.
Well, that is a real concern, and we've got Sunak there, but I'm afraid he's it's Rishi Corbyn. Mike, thank you so much for your thoughts. Rishi Corbyn, Comrade Sunak, who knows? Anyway, in the third hour, we're going to be talking about energy costs. We're going to be talking about shale gas, fossil fuels, because one of the ways of getting inflation down is to get the cost of energy down. That drives everything. Stay with us. You're listening to Tice Talk here on Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 12.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. Liverpool are demanding answers after the chaotic scenes outside the Paris Stadium before the Reds' defeat at the Champions League final. Fans struggled to get it into the Stade de France, causing a 30-minute delay to kick-off. Police used tear gas to disperse the crowd clogging up the gates. Witnesses are blaming poor organisation at the ground, but UEFA have said fans caused the hold-up because they were trying to enter with fake tickets. Liverpool have refuted the claims. Real Madrid scooped their 14th European Cup after defeating Liverpool 1-0. Manager Jurgen Klopp spoke about the delays before the game following the match.
I know that the families had real struggles to get into the stadium, but the reasons, I don't know yet, but I heard that we will have, what is our saying for that, further investigations to figure out what's going on there. I heard a few things that were not good, not nice. Obviously, that was pretty tricky out there, but I don't know more about it.
Ukrainian forces are continuing to resist a Russian assault on Severodonetsk, the largest city they still hold in the eastern Donbass region. The governor of Luhansk says the city's weathering heavy artillery barrages, making it impossible to identify casualties. Kyiv is still appealing to the West to send more longer-range weapons in order to turn the tide in the war, although they're currently taking delivery of anti-ship missiles from Denmark. Downing Street have denied putting pressure on Sue Gray to dilute her report into lockdown-breaking parties ahead of its publication. The Sunday Times is reporting that senior civil servants tried to have some names excluded, claiming the so-called ABBA party held in the Prime Minister's flat on November the 13th, 2020, was tweaked by Boris Johnson's Chief of Staff, Steve Barclay. The race is on to stop an oil spill on the Devon coast after a fire on a super yacht. The vessel, which is carrying around 8,000 litres of fuel, sank in a Torquay marina after the blaze yesterday. Dramatic images showed thick plumes of black smoke billowing across the harbour as flames engulfed the boat. And former champion jockey Lester Piggott, widely considered one of the greatest of all time, has died at the age of 86. He won the Epsom Derby 9 times and was crowned British champion jockey 11 times, going on to accumulate more than 4,000 horse racing victories. His family confirmed he passed away peacefully in Switzerland this morning. Those are the latest news headlines. Still to come, your Talk Sport update, but first, your weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV weather.
A fine afternoon to come this Sunday with plenty of warm sunny spells and light winds. Temperatures will reach around 21 Celsius, well above average for early May. Taking a look at the picture for 7 o'clock, and there could just be the odd shower across western and central Scotland with temperatures around 10 to 13 Celsius. However, much of Scotland will have a fine end to the day with plenty of sunny spells. Increasing cloud for Northern Ireland with the odd light shower too. However, Northern England will be fine with plenty of dry weather and temperatures still around 18 Celsius. Wales and the rest of England would also have a fine end to the day with plenty of sunshine and temperatures around 11 Celsius in the east and 19 in the west. An increasing risk of rain for the far northwest as we end the day. Elsewhere, staying fine and dry.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV weather.
Liverpool are nursing their wounds after a 1-0 defeat against Real Madrid in the Champions League final, giving the Spanish side their 14th trophy. Jurgen Klopp's side were thwarted by a defiant performance from Real goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois, who stopped 6 shots at goal by Mohamed Salah.
They scored a goal we didn't. That's the easiest explanation in the world of football. And harsh to get. When the goalkeeper is man of the match, then something is going wrong for the other team.
As you've been hearing, though, the match was overshadowed by events off the pitch, as thousands of Liverpool fans were denied entry to the Stade de France, delaying kick-off by more than half an hour. French police even used pepper spray on fans who UEFA accused of having fake tickets. Liverpool's demanding an investigation. Nottingham Forest are taking on Huddersfield in the Championship playoff final at Wembley later, after a 23-year-old absence from the Premier League. The final is the most valuable game in football, with promotion worth around £170 million. Kick-off is at 4:30. That's all for now. I'll be back with more in half an hour.
I think the topic that I'd like more people to be thinking about is definitely health and social care. You know, we have an outrageous system where we don't look after our elderly in the way we should. We've got to have a proper grown-up and honest conversation about that.
It does indeed make sense to be listening to Tice Talk. We're into the third hour. Good afternoon. If you've recently just switched on or, starting to listen or watch, we've been talking about Rishi Corbyn or Comrade Sunak. I'm not quite sure, but lots of you feel like I do, that something's gone badly wrong. And we've been talking about the benefit system. How come there are 5.3 million on out-of-work benefits, and yet there's a shortage of labour? We've got more vacancies than unemployed. I don't understand it. Emma Louisa says here, people on benefits have their housing and council tax pays. They also get free dental care, various handouts. There's no incentive to work if you're worse off by doing a hard day's graft. This issue needs to be addressed, but never is. And of course, one of the big issues, and the reason that the Chancellor gave his huge sort of giveaway last week, in my view, something had to be done, but it was done in the wrong direction, is the cost of energy, which has completely gone through the roof. By October, the average household is going to be around about £2,800. And within that, of course, there's VAT at 5%, there's environmental levies, there's huge network operating costs, people's standing charges per day has gone through the roof. And all of this is because we've decided, in this government's wisdom, I say that in inverted commas, they've decided not to use the British energy resources, the North Sea oil and gas. They've made it harder for licences there. And, of course, they haven't used the treasure under our feet called shale gas that they promised us. They absolutely promised us. And, of course, we trust our politicians, don't we, when they write things in manifestos. They promised us back in 2017 that we would use this shale gas treasure and create a whole new industry that could level up and create jobs and activity. And if we had done that, you see, using our own gas, our own energy, that we all own, no one else owns it, we all own it, we all have a piece of it. If we'd done that, we would have had much, much cheaper energy. But instead, we're importing it from the Middle East or from Russia or from America, and simultaneously creating far more CO2. You couldn't make up the stupidity. Well, I'm delighted to be joined here in the studio, an exclusive first time, Charles McAllister, who is the Director of UK Onshore Oil and Gas. So you represent, Charles, and thank you for joining me. You represent the operators who want to get involved in the shale gas industry, some of whom have actually already spent millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions.
Yes, sir.
What's the latest? Because we had the promise back in 17, on the back of which some of your members started investing lots of money, and then in 2019 the government reneged, they bottled it. A few eco-zealots rock up, whinge and whine, and the government bottles it. But now, under pressure with energy bills going through the roof, people like me saying we've got this treasure, we should use it, they've announced a review. Tell us, what's the timing of this and what you guys are doing about it?
OK, great. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, my members, there are 5 shale gas companies in the UK. Since about 2010, they've pumped in the guts of £500 million into exploration for shale gas in the UK, but the government opposed a moratorium, we feel unjustly, in 2019, almost 1,000 days ago. Thankfully, the British government has now seen sense and has commissioned the British Geological Survey to conduct a review of the science and the regulations around shale gas. Now, that review will be submitted to government by the end of June, and then they will have to make a decision in, I would imagine, the months leading after that.
OK, so they're carrying out a review.
Yeah.
We all know about governments kicking the can down the road, and a short review may lead to a medium-term review, or they might take longer to announce it. What are they really looking for? Are they looking in changes in technology, changes in techniques, a better understanding of what actually an earthquake really means? Because it sounds a terrifying word, but actually, in the vast majority of cases, it's really not terrifying at all.
So I'll answer that question first, and then I'll go through a bit of the review. So you're absolutely right. There's a lot of hysteria and hyperbole around this issue. I really want to get the facts out there. So the regulatory limits that were set for us on seismicity were the tightest in the world.
And seismicity means?
Earthquakes.
Earthquakes,
yeah, absolutely. So we would have to stop if we hit a 0.5 on the Richter scale. And to demonstrate what that's like, if I stand up and sit down, that's a 0.5 on the Richter scale.
For those who are listening, Charles has just stood up off his chair and sat down again. And he has created An earthquake, folks?
A 0.5.
Of 0.5?
Yeah, that's what is felt at the surface from a 0.5. Now, if you look, the government allegedly based the moratorium on a report done on the Preston New Road 1Z well in Lancashire. The largest event of that well was 1.5 on the Richter scale, which is the equivalent of me dropping a honeydew melon in this room. Now, I don't have a honeydew melon to show you, but I could do that next time.
I'm sure lots of people at home have got a honeydew melon. Imagine that you stand up, you pick up a melon out of the wherever it's being stored, and you drop it on the floor. That's 1.5 earthquake.
1.5 on the Richter scale, yeah, absolutely. And then even if we look at the largest event, the 2.9, and the government did not base the moratorium on that event, really important point, because the report into that event only came out 11 months after the moratorium. Even if we look at that one, the surface vibration from that is about half what is permitted at construction sites in the UK. So if you're building, a house, any sort of construction, you'll get set a limit. What we introduced was half that, and they shut us down.
Right. So it's really important to sort of compare apples with apples and honeydew melons with honeydew melons, because you've got to get this in context, haven't we? So what you're talking about, and for example, a lorry driving past your front door of your home, what sort of level of earthquake is that?
Between 1.5 and 2.
Between 1.5, and that's similar for a coach?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the context of this is really, really important, because there have been all sorts of scare stories out there amongst various people and a very well-funded environmental lobby saying it creates earthquakes. Yeah. But actually, many of what they're talking about is actually just normal living conditions.
Absolutely, and that's a really important point in the review. The British government has asked the British Geological Survey if the differences between the regulations on shale gas and construction general traffic movements are justified. Really important point that needs to be addressed. And to answer the other part of your question, what else is being assessed? So it's all of the above. Are there other techniques? Are there other technologies? Is there a better understanding of the geology? That's what the BGS has been tasked to do. We are going to be submitting evidence to that, using what we think is new science. We're also pulling in information from some very large international companies, and we're going to provide data from the United States, because don't forget, there have been nearly 650,000 wells in the United States that have been fracked out of a total population of about 1 million wells. So there's a huge amount of data we can pull from.
Right, so you're going to be using international evidence to inform the BGS.
Yeah.
And I guess lots of other people may be submitting evidence.
Yep, absolutely.
Presumably anybody's able to, good, bad, or otherwise, as to their views on it. And are the BGS, the British Geological Survey, are they geared up for this review?
They are. I mean, I would say their understanding is only secondary to the understanding of the subsurface in the UK is only secondary to the companies that I'm working for. They are absolutely brilliant, very good scientists. They have a very good understanding of this now, but they're not a political organisation.
Sure.
They will write a scientific document on which a political view will be taken. The first bit doesn't scare me. The second bit scares me a little bit, because I don't know what the political assessment is going to be.
Sure. So they're going to do a review and give that to the government in some months after June. It might be September. Never know, it might be longer. And then, of course, it sits in the government's in tray to then make another decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if they didn't support it, I think to lock us into reliance on these huge volumes of imports of liquefied natural gas for the next 30 or 40 years, because that's effectively what they would be doing, that is a geopolitical, environmental and economic error.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, the first wells that were drilled by a company called Quadrilla in Lancashire, and another company, Ineos. They made an offer to the government to do another test well on their site, which is elsewhere. Just give us a bit of intel on that.
Okay, so sure. So there's another site in the East Midlands that is a joint venture between Ineos, one of the world's largest chemical companies, iGas, one of the UK's largest onshore operators, and Egdon Resources. And they haven't said necessarily it would be that site, although it could be. Ineos have offered a test site, and they said they'll give the government whatever they want. They'll put tens of millions of pounds of investment in to show that this can be done safely, because this accusation that shale gas is in some way unsafe, as representing the industry body, I totally reject.
Absolutely. And my view is that, I mean, the value of this treasure under our feet is so great. I mean, it could be somewhere between half and the whole of the country's national debt.
Well, you always say, and I do love the treasure. If you look at Q1 gas prices...
That's Q1, the first quarter this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you extrapolate that over the 50 years' worth of gas we have under our feet, £3.3 trillion. That's 60% greater than UK GDP.
I mean, these are huge numbers, but the analogy I keep using for people is it's a bit like, some long-lost aunt has very kindly given you a house, and the last thing she says to you is, oh, by the way, there's some treasure under the floorboards of the house, which is equal in value to the value of the mortgage of the house, but I couldn't be bothered to dig it up. I'm pretty sure, and I've tested this on the doors, if someone did that to you, you'd get a decent screwdriver, you'd clean it up, get rid of the rust, you'd lift the floorboards, you'd get out the treasure and pay off the mortgage, wouldn't you? Would you do that, Charles?
Absolutely. I mean, I always say to people the case for shale gas in the UK, in one word, is logical. Blindingly logical.
But it's also incredibly valuable. It'll create British jobs in areas that we need it, high-paid jobs, skilled jobs. It'll create money, and it'll enable us, all of us, guess what? To resolve the biggest problem we've got, which is high energy bills, high gas bills, high electricity bills. Just think about that. That's the value of the treasure under our feet. Stay with us. I'll be taking your calls, your tweets, your messages. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, everyone, to Tice Talk here in the third hour of the show. We were just talking to Charles McAllister, who's the director of UK Onshore Oil and Gas. That's the lobbying group for the shale gas industry, with his thoughts about what's going on with this evidence being put to the British Geological Survey. So we'll follow that and keep people updated. Meanwhile, we're going to go to some calls in a second, but lots of tweets continuing to come in. Good tweet here from Jackie, putting the other side of this issue about work and benefits and things. Jackie says, I'm disappointed that you failed to see the bigger picture. If you shut the country for 2 years, lower growth, laden business with debt, surprise, surprise, people lose jobs. It's not a choice, so please can we stop generalising and demonising those out of work? I'm absolutely not demonising people who've lost their jobs because businesses have gone bust or whatever. But what is clear is that, and we've heard it from other callers, Jackie, some people are well aware of people who are able now to work part-time, for example, 1 or 2 days a week, receive benefits so that they can therefore get by without having to continue to work for the rest of the week. And surely, if they're able-bodied, then why should those of us who are working 5 days a week, why should we pay to subsidise those who just want a nice, easy life and to work 1 or 2 days a week? Something's not quite right. And you know something's not right when there's 5.3 million people receiving out-of-work benefits, some of whom, of course, many of whom may well be completely justified with vulnerabilities or disabilities. But we all know there's a lot within that number, which is 1.5 million higher than it was at the time of the referendum. There's a lot within that who I think actually could be contributing to society, could be helping, and that's my point. That's my concern. A greater incentive to work by cutting taxes for those in work is a better way of helping everybody. But thanks for that message, Jackie. We're going to head round to Hereford, where Chris is there. Hi, Chris. You've got some thoughts on the benefit system.
Yeah, hello. Basically, about 2-3 months ago, I was rushed to A&E with heart problems, and I have been diagnosed with heart failure. And basically, I've just got about a week or 2 weeks ago. I've just going back to work. I only work 2 hours a day because that's all I can manage at the moment because of my condition. I do claim PIP disability benefits because I have a learning disability as well. But I feel that I want to contribute something towards the system because I don't want to sit at home doing nothing because of simple reason. It's terrible. I was off sick for about 2 months and it was horrible. I live on my own and it's just one of these things. It really upsets me because I said I don't know what's going to happen to me in the next 5 or 10 years because I might not be here because with heart failure you don't know what you're going to be thing. So I try to keep busy. I try to be active as I can, but there's a lot of things I can't do anymore with heart failure.
Sure, I understand that, Chris, and well done you. I mean, you know, suffering that must have been pretty traumatic and pretty scary, but really interesting in your thoughts that actually good for your sort of mental well-being to get back feeling that you're doing something and contributing as your health allows. Yeah, yes. I know I won't be paying. I probably don't be paying in tax, but I just feel that I can understand that there's 5 million people on out-of-work benefits, and we've got more jobs as well. So That's right.
I think there's a lot of people out there that genuinely they need claim benefits. They genuinely need that support by the government. They do work and they do contribute to society. But I just can't understand this. There's loads of jobs, but there's 5 million people out of work.
That's the thing that I'm struggling to understand. The numbers don't compute. Yeah. And it seems odd. Just whilst you're on, before I let you go, Chris, so the benefit system, how efficient, how quickly has it worked for you, the administration of it?
Well, as I said, I was assessed about 3 or 4 years ago because when my mum and dad passed away, I had a hidden disability, so I was assessed by the government. I was assessed by an assessor, and I was assessed, so I received my PIP, and they just send me a letter every year.
Okay, so that works quite well. It's been quite efficient for you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, that's good to hear. Chris, thank you so much for that course. Really helpful to understand that. And actually, there's Chris, who's had some serious health problems, but actually is overcoming them, wants to help, wants to contribute, wants to work, and therefore be able to do that for a few hours a day, some days a week. Really interesting. Thank you for that, Chris. We're going to head up north to Rotherham, where Howard is there. Howard, good afternoon. You've got a question on shale gas.
Yeah, good afternoon, Richard. Looked at the shale gas business years ago when they first started with it, because it I come from an ex-mining area, and we had exactly the same gases in the coal mines, which is methane, and the biggest problem of all is 55% of the volume of the methane is carbon dioxide, and we haven't got the means or the facilities to be able to get rid of the carbon dioxide, and this was one of the main reasons why the fracking was held back.
So my understanding is that the main reason the fracking, because the truth is that the government had, they'd looked into it and they'd done all the analysis, and they'd decided that they were going to allow it. It was in the 17 manifesto, so they looked at all that. But the reason they then stopped it was because of what they perceived was the seismicity, the earthquake events, and I say that sort of in inverted commas, which were above the levels. That's what stopped it. It wasn't the fact that there was CO2. I mean, yes, if you burn any gas, then you're going to create CO2. But the thing is, as I understand, Howard, is that if we import gas from Qatar, right, you're creating much more CO2 by liquefying it to put it in ships, to ship it across the ocean, and then re-vaporize it, but to a tune of 3 or 4 times than the CO2 you create when you burn our own shale gas.
The CO2 stays in Qatar and stays in America. It doesn't come here.
Yeah, but in terms of climate change, we talk about global CO2 levels. That's the concern. It's not like CO2 just stays in one part of the world or the other. It's a global issue, the quantity of CO2.
I quite agree with you on a global issue, but on a national issue, it actually costs more to obtain electricity from fracked gas in this country than it does to use North Sea gas.
It can't do, Howard, because look at America. They use shale gas, and they've got gas prices that are about a third of ours. So that just simply can't be right. And you've also got the huge transport costs, which sometimes can be 20–30% of the value of the gas, shipping it across the ocean from places like Qatar.
That's only because their fuel prices are a lot lower than they are here.
But that's because they use their own gas as opposed to importing it.
Well, you check the figures up, and it would cost more.
I'm telling you, Howard, I have done. That's why I know the figures.
Right, okay, if that's what you say. But like I say, I looked at it because I thought it was a brilliant idea. And I spoke to my father and my grandfather. My grandfather was a miner's rescue, and he said that the biggest problem of all, then this is why the mining companies never brought the methane out of the mine.
Well, look, Howard, I tell you what, check the figures and then give me another call, and we'll see whether or not we can agree on that. Thank you, Howard in Rotherham. You're listening to Tice Talk. It's Talk TV.
I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk TV. I think my most memorable and proudest moment in journalism over all these years is actually being on air during the lockdowns, even when I had COVID myself. Over the last 2 years, getting people to tell their stories, not just about people who lost loved ones to COVID, but people who lost their fundamental freedoms, their children's schooling, their mental health, their physical health, their businesses, and giving people the chance to tell their stories about how it affected them.
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Nadira Tudor. Liverpool are demanding answers after the chaotic scenes outside the Paris Stadium before the Reds' defeat at the Champions League final. Fans struggled to get into the Stade de France, causing a 30-minute delay to kick off. Police used tear gas to disperse the crowd, clogging up the gates. It's been revealed one was closed up for up to an hour, causing concerning congestion. Real Madrid scooped their 14th European Cup after defeating Liverpool 1-0. Manager Jurgen Klopp spoke about the delays before the game following the match.
I know that the families had real struggles to get into the stadium, but the reasons, I don't know yet. What I heard that we will have, what is they're saying for that, further investigations to figure out what's going on there. I heard a few things that were not good, not nice. Obviously, it was pretty tricky out there, but I don't know. I don't know more about it.
Ukrainian forces are continuing to resist a Russian assault on Severodonetsk, the largest city they still hold in the eastern Donbass region. The governor of Luhansk says the city's weathering heavy artillery barrages, making it impossible to identify casualties. Kyiv is still appealing to the West to send more longer-range weapons in order to turn the tide in the war. Downing Street have denied putting pressure on Sue Gray to dilute her report into lockdown-breaking parties ahead of its publication. The Sunday Times is reporting that senior civil servants tried to have some names excluded, claiming the so-called ABBA party held in the Prime Minister's flat on November the 13th, 2020 was tweaked by Boris Johnson's Chief of Staff, Steve Barclay. And former champion jockey Lester Piggott, widely considered one of the greatest of all time, has died at the age of 86. He won the Epsom Derby 9 times and was crowned a British champion jockey 11 times. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk. I don't know where time is going because we have suddenly got to the last half hour of the 3-hour show. Lots of chat, lots of talk, and this very much is climate hour, it's energy hour. And we've just been talking earlier about the shale gas potential of this great country, the treasure under our feet. Concerns there from that last caller in Rotherham, Howard, about a couple of issues. He's going to go and look at his figures. I've got my figures. But very helpfully, and this is the joy of being listened to internationally all over the world, Paul Henley has tweeted in, and Paul says, let's just find it again. I've worked in the Middle East for the last 10 years, hydraulically stimulated 100+ wells. It's absolutely standard operation, no risks whatsoever. He then goes on to say about the CO2 point. An amine plant, I hope I pronounced that correctly, will strip out CO2 from the natural gas stream. Again, standard stuff, standard operation worldwide. That's from Paul. Anybody else with any experience on this? I want to hear about it. I want to share this knowledge, this information, because I truly believe that if we're right on this, it absolutely transforms the cost of energy in this country. It transforms the nation's balance sheet. And all of this shale gas, we all own it. We all own a share in this shale gas. That's the potential. Why wouldn't you try and learn from it? Why wouldn't you do a test well? Why wouldn't we see and be a world leader in extracting it? That's my point. I'm also, keen that we have a proper understanding of the different views about fossil fuels, about climate change. And a bit like COVID, you had to follow the science, and there was only one science, apparently, according to our political leaders, regarding how to deal with COVID. It turned out that lockdowns actually were completely the wrong thing to do. Likewise, on climate change, there are different views from different experts and different scientists. And I was fascinated and privileged to be given an advance copy of a book that's coming out literally this week with an intriguing title. Listen to this. The title of this new book is called Fossil Future: Why Global Human Flourishing Requires More Oil, Coal and Natural Gas, Not Less. Just think about that. Global human flourishing requires more of fossil fuels. Well, I'm really delighted to be joined by the author of this book that I've started to read and I'm enjoying, by Alex Epstein, who is on the west coast of America, and therefore it's in the middle of the night. Alex, a very good morning to you, although it's good afternoon here in London. Thank you so much for joining us and for sending me this advance copy of this book, which is absolutely fascinating because you're putting the other side of a really vitally important debate. And you're reminding people of some of the advantages that fossil fuels have given us. I mean, I've read the first sort of third of the book, but I mean, we could talk about this forever, but we've only got sort of 10 minutes or so. Just give us some early headlines on this that you think is absolutely critical for people to understand, Alex.
I mean, one way of thinking about it is, we're told that we should rapidly eliminate fossil fuels and nobody can disagree with this and stuff. But in fact, the world actually does agree with me in a very real way. We've been told to be rapidly eliminating fossil fuels for decades, and yet fossil fuels are 80% of the world's energy, and they are still growing, particularly in the parts of the world that care most about low-cost, reliable energy, such as China and India. And so we have to ask, why is this? And I think the basic reason is it's the same reason you take a prescription drug. You regard the benefits as far outweighing the side effects. It doesn't mean that you don't believe there are any negative side effects, but you believe that the benefits far outweigh them. And one example I have is with climate. People think of it as, we've made climate so dangerous with fossil fuels, it's going to get a lot worse. Well, you have to recognize we've actually made climate much safer with fossil fuels. We can measure the death rate from climate-related disasters, and it's actually down 98% over the last 100 years. And fossil fuels are a huge reason why, because they make it warm when it's cold. They make it cool when it's hot. They allow us to do irrigation. That's really key because drought is such a climate killer. And many, many other things that make us unnaturally safe from climate. So I think most people talking about this are ignoring the benefits.
Let's just remind ourselves that key figure, because whenever there's there's a forest fire, there's a flash flood, we're all told it's climate change, it's getting worse, it's a disaster. That statistic is really powerful. On climate-related deaths from disasters.
And it's very important that it is ignored by all of our institutions that are supposedly giving us expert knowledge. So it's ignored by our politicians talking about this. It's ignored by our newspapers. It's also most ominously ignored by what's called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. I've searched their multi-thousand-page reports. There's no mention of declining climate-related deaths. That's like a polio report that doesn't mention there's a polio vaccine and far fewer deaths from polio.
And yet those deaths have fallen by 98%, 99% in the last 100 years. Truly remarkable.
Yeah, we're safer than ever.
And again, the benefits, I think, of what you quite rightly call cost-effective energy and human flourishing. Take China, where life expectancy in the last 50 years has gone up from under 60 to just under 80.
And it's amazing, and it's another case where, again, look, we're in denial about the benefits, because if you hear about China, people think life is getting shorter there. They define it only by the worst days of pollution. And I argue they can have much better pollution policies like we do in the U.S. or you have in the U.K. They can move toward that. But the fact is, by using energy, you empower yourself by using machines to be productive and prosperous. And billions of people around the world still lack cost-effective energy, and that's why the world needs far more of this, and the negative climate side effects actually pale in comparison to the positives of using more fossil fuels.
So you use the number of about 3 billion people around the world still essentially have no access to cost-effective energy and are relying on wood and dung.
It's about a third of the world relying on wood and dung, and one statistic is that 3 billion people are using less electricity than a typical American refrigerator in their entire life.
Wow. And so, quite rightly, and it's about context, isn't it? You're not saying there aren't negative side effects from fossil fuels. What you're saying is the benefits, the human flourishing, far, far outweigh it, and therefore we can deal with those side effects.
Yeah, and in particular, because fossil fuels empower you to use machines, they can actually neutralize and overwhelm their own side effects. So even if they make drought 10% worse, they can allow you to irrigate and move food around so that drought is 100 times better. And that's what's happened. We have a 99% decline in the rate of drought-related death over the last century.
Which is quite remarkable, and I just think that is so important. I mean, India, for example, the life expectancy in the last 50 years increased from 47 to over 70. These are real huge benefits.
I mean, these are real people, right? I mean, these are real people, and if we had followed the advice of many of what I call our designated experts 4 decades ago, many of these people would have died already for sure. And so we really, really need to take this into account. Another thing with climate is we can't assume that just because we made the change, we are having an impact on climate, that it's bad. I'm a philosopher, and I'm really against this idea that human impact is always bad and always self-destructive. It's sometimes bad, but it's sometimes good, and we have to weigh it carefully, not have a religious dogma that it's bad to impact everything.
Because quite often, and you've referred to it, and I'm probably going to get you back on in a few weeks' time to talk about some of the utterly absurd sort of catastrophe forecasts from these experts about what may happen if we don't sort of get rid of fossil fuels now. I mean, and some of this stuff is just ludicrous.
Yeah, I mean, one that particularly irks me is President Obama's top science advisor, a guy named John Holdren, predicted 1 billion climate-related deaths from famine in 2020, and we had record harvests and fewer climate-related deaths than ever. And he's just like, oh, yeah, well, I just said it was possible. They're not. And he was elevated to the highest science office in the land. And so there's something really, really, really wrong. And I think there's a lot of false assumptions and values that are causing these people to be viewed as credible, even though they're always wrong.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely fascinating, Alex. I've had a great tweet in here from Pablo. Serious lessons to be learned as the Glasgow summit proves to be the most polluting COP meeting in history because of all the private jets used to get everyone there.
Yeah, I mean, their perverse logic, and it makes a certain amount of sense, is, well, if we stop enough people from using energy, we'll offset our own emissions. But that just means you're going to kill a bunch of people, and then it's okay for you to use a plane because you're flying to plan how to kill people. That's the translation of it, in my eyes.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think what your book shows is about context, and that actually the benefits of cost-effective energy and the human flourishing that comes from that all over the world far outweighs the negative side effects that we can deal with. Alex, thank you so much. I look forward to finishing the book. Anybody else, grab a copy if you can. Fossil Future, why global human flourishing requires more fossil fuels, more oil, coal and natural gas, not less. That's Alex Epstein from the west coast of America. It's the middle of the night for him. Thank you very much. We'll take your calls and messages after the break. You're listening to the home of common sense. It's Tice Talk. It is Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're into the final quarter of an hour before we've got the wonderful Trisha Goddard at 1 o'clock to take you through until 4 o'clock. And then, of course, it is the one and only Kevin O'Sullivan from 4 till 7. We've been super busy with the tweets and things. A great tweet coming here from DM who says, human-induced global warming is predicated on the assumption that CO2 we produce is the cause of climate change. This is an untested hypothesis. If it turns out, and this is the key if, that natural cycles are responsible, we will have made an investment in the greatest ever own goal. Thank you for that, DM. Meanwhile, Carl says, following on from the discussion and the tweets about benefits, we fall into a lower income family just shy of any help, just above any help, therefore. The difference between working and claiming is quite small, so we think, is there any point with work? There we are. That's the nub of it. There are loads of jobs available, but nobody wants the jobs, and therefore there's no tax going in. That's the nub of it. Thank you very much for that, Carl. We're going to head west to Oxfordshire first, where John is on the line. Good afternoon, John.
Oh, Richard, very good to talk to you. I'm kind of without a party at the moment, so I'm starting to look at more and more information about your party.
Is that a sort of number 10 type party, or is that a political party?
A number 10 type party. I'm sure you'll not be so silly as to have parties the way they do. Anyway, look. The point I was going to make is been backed up by your last tweet about CO2. I don't want to go at length about that, but there are many world-renowned scientists who say CO2 is vital to life, and we're making a big mistake. But I phoned about Alex Epstein because that's the first time on any television program I've actually heard the real common sense about how we deal with this issue. And what terrifies me is not every MP, there's a few exceptions, but my MP and most refuse to even discuss the possibility that there may be an error in the direction they're taking with net zero. I'm virtually told the science is settled, please don't bother me with your emails.
Completely, and of course,
and it frightens me because our leaders won't listen to any alternative science.
And that's what terrifies me, because science is never settled. Science always challenges each other, and that's how you progress. And it was, but it was the same. You know, we were told with COVID that basically you had to follow the science. And the science said we had to lock down. And it turned out that actually elsewhere in the world people didn't lock down, countries like Sweden. And guess what? It turns out they had less excess deaths than we did. There's no such thing as the science.
South Dakota, they were told they have thousands of deaths because they didn't lock down. And they had one of the best results in America.
Well, John, keep listening, because I can tell you I'm going to have a climate corner, energy hour, regularly to talk about this stuff, because I think it is important that both sides of the debate are heard. And Alex wasn't denying that there's some side effects to fossil fuels.
No, because there's another guy a bit like Alex called Bjorn Lomborg. Have you heard of him?
I haven't actually.
Get your guys to look up Bjorn Lomborg, because he believes in all the climate stuff, but he says there's no panic, no emergency, because you deal with it, and he states how you deal with it calmly, sensibly, for a fraction of the billions of pounds that these politicians are throwing at it.
That's right. I mean, ultimately, if we're concerned about some very slightly rising sea levels, maybe we'd actually save a lot of money by investing in better sea level defences than spending it on renewable wind turbines offshore.
If we believe in this stuff, the sea level's not going to rise and take out London in a 10-year period or a 5-year period. It will be very gradual.
Quite right.
Gradual over a period of time.
John,
and just one little indication. Sorry.
Just quickly, go for it.
You're in charge. No, Al Gore put out a book showing hurricanes all over. A photograph on the front of the book shows hurricanes on the equator. Hurricanes cannot happen on the equator.
Yeah.
Yes, he puts his name to it.
You're right, John. Al Gore said a lot of things.
But that's a simple illustration of total ignorance.
He said we should be 100% renewable by 2018, and you could have the equivalent from renewable energy of $1 per gallon equivalent. Absolute nonsense, it turned out. John, thank you so much from Oxfordshire. We will keep talking about this. We're going to head east to Essex, where there might be lots of cyclists in Ride London. Dave, are you one of those cyclists? Are you on your bike?
No, I'm standing outside my church.
Ah, lovely. Have you been to church? Have you had two sermons this morning? Do you have a sermon in the church and my sermon?
No, unfortunately, my church is still under lockdown, so I sit in the gardens and I feed the squirrels and I contemplate just where we're going in this world, us old folk, and it's kind of frustrating. Now, I think you're being rather unkind to Richie Sunak, because calling him communistic names, I suppose, is a trap they want you to fall in, because you see, we've put ourselves up for this global warming fraud, and once we did, we put ourselves into a straitjacket of wealth distribution, and I'm afraid the only way out of this problem is by socialistic tactics, and this is exactly what they want us to do. They want you to start normalising the comrade Sunak, and finally we'll vote for the socialists and they'll get in, and then we're really for it. And this is the trap we're falling into. But we've got to pull away from these crazy Americans. Completely. We've got to call this what it is. It's a global fraud, such as the pandemic. We've got to stand on our own 2 feet and declare ourselves a free nation and take off all the restrictions. The only way you can get an economy thriving, it's not on renewable energy, because it just doesn't produce enough power. We need an industry. We need oil, gas, just like we was, and we'll get back to where we was in short goods.
Absolutely, and you've got to grow, but that's what my real concern, and that's why I'm using the label, slightly tongue-in-cheek, of course, but the point is, we've got to highlight to people, Dave, that there's a serious risk there. If we don't change course, then, as I said, the water goes over the socialist waterfall, and it becomes too late. We can't get it back, and that's the real risk. But we could get it back if we change course now. And he could cut taxes, he could go for growth, and the whole point of Brexit was, as you've just inferred, was to be an independent, self-reliant nation making our own decisions.
Well, I agree with very much of what you say, Richard, on a weekly basis. But I think a lot of this stems from the education our children are getting in school. I was on a parents' meeting not so long ago, and I sat with a maths teacher, and he was showing my daughter how to find the value. And I just couldn't resist it. I said, "Excuse me." I said, "Could you tell me the job that she's going to need this stuff?" And he said, "Well, it all held." I said, "Look, why don't you?" And I was just flabbergasted at what they're teaching our kids. Education, education, education. We've got to start teaching our kids about capitalism and the full policies of communism, socialism, whatever you want to call it. We've got to get back to basics, Richard, and I hope your party does well.
Well, thank you, David. Yeah, the point is, there are two sides to every debate, and I posed the question at the beginning of the show. Some people might think that socialism is better. I don't think actually anybody has come on and put that argument, although it was a tweeter, Sam, asked me some searching questions, which hopefully I replied to. But we've got to have that debate. And those of us who believe that actually work is good and incentive is good, and that we should be cutting taxes for the lowest paid, the least well off, that's a crucial debate to be had that doesn't seem to be being had in the Conservative Party.
Actually, our children are our future.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. Well, thank you so much for that. Enjoy the birds and the sunshine out by your church in Essex. Thank you very much for that. Now, coming up, of course, for the next 3 hours, we have the wonderful Trisha Goddard, who is there on the line. Trisha, a very good afternoon to you. How are you? You're looking resplendent there.
Thank you so much. I'm fine. I hope you're well as well. It's interesting that your last caller, you talk about children, because I'm looking at the shootings in Uvalde in Texas. I'm going to be talking to I'm going to be talking to a mum of one of the children who was killed in the Sandy Hook awful massacre. Does America ever move on from that? But I'm also going to be talking to somebody who's involved in researching gun violence in the USA as well. And I'll be talking to a grief counsellor, because I don't know about you, Richard, but just about every woman, everybody I talk to, but if you're a parent especially, I'd say there's a visceral, isn't there? This has had an absolutely visceral effect. And so she's, I talked to Julia Samuel about dealing with grief and what have you, but we have got lighter stories, like one of the very few female black cabbies in London, and what she has to put up with and her great life. So we've got light and shade for everyone.
Fantastic. I mean, we need lots more cabbies, full stop, in London, because there's a massive, massive shortage of them. I hope she's got some friends she can encourage into the trade. Well, we've had a fascinating show here. We've been talking about benefits, the incentive to work, energy issues, climate issues. Anything else on your show, Tricia?
Oh gosh, yeah. We always have our faith panel on a Sunday, so we have clergy.
Oh.